آه إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فالسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا. All right, I see. Um, yeah, I did. Right. This or is this rescheduled? No, it's not rescheduled. The live is going ahead. Unfortunately, with the MindTrap that was scheduled with Sheikh Atabek, I'm not sure what happened to Sheikh Atabek. So I did speak to him just at 10 p.m. And then suddenly I'm not sure when I tried just before 11. I have actually been sitting here waiting just in case. I think his phone, I don't know what's happened. Hopefully he's okay, but his phone wasn't responsive. So, khair, I thought in any case, right, let's come live and let's take a look at what some of your thoughts. I know we'd had a mind trap last week. Allah. Khair, what I'm looking to do is I'll share the link and we can discuss some key themes. Sorry, all of your, mashallah, bless you all. Shukran, shukran. Allah bless you. Sheikh Atabek keeps teaching. I did think, well, for what it's worth, it was Sheikh Atabek who actually got in touch to say, look, let's do a mind trap. So this is why, I don't know, I hope everything's okay on his end. So it wasn't really, so he was himself very keen to do this. So hopefully it's all good. I mean, maybe something's come up or maybe his phone's died or something. I don't know. But khair, yassar Allah. We'll circle back. There are a few other mind traps as well I do have in mind, and a few interesting conversations pending. Bi'ithnillah. Right, how are you guys? Right, so I'm going to. I was thinking since it is Blessed Friday, Allah, let's get some of your blessed presences up here. See what's on your thoughts and mind. I will give a brief overview. I was thinking about, I've just shared the link as well. Those of you just tuning in, you can click like and share. Right, so my thoughts on the discussion that happened. Right, yeah. You see, I am a key proponent of dialogue. I do feel overall it was a successful dialogue. You see, after I'd done my mind trap with Brother MFG, I then saw, I mean, after in the days that followed, saw many clips. People had sent me some clips, and then once you click on one, the algorithm brings you more and more. I saw a lot of previous clips of Brother MFG coming on other people's lives and debating them. And yeah, I mean the kind of dynamic was just horrible to watch. Absolutely horrible. You know, they're shouting at each other, being very rude, disrespectful to one another. You know, all this kind of stuff, just vitriolic hate speech, really. So, relatively speaking, and I saw the algorithm brought a few clips that I think he's appeared previously with a few different groups and dynamics. He's appeared with Muhammad Hijab. He's appeared with some of the Shia representatives. He's appeared with a few other people. And I saw, and then I didn't really want to watch anymore. So, relatively speaking, I do feel our discussion was a great success because, for the most part, we managed to speak. And I know some people were upset about, well, you're speaking over each other. And yeah, so, and I can understand why that was happening more so from Brother MFG's part, because just looking at all of his other dialogues and discussions, they're not really discussions, they're just all shouting debates and they're just monologues. So I can see that maybe Brother Muhammad was not accustomed or used to just having a very calm discussion, like an actual dialogue. And the reason why would, I did watch back, I would interrupt, is because Brother Muhammad wouldn't really answer the point. He would like have almost like you see, a dialogue is not two monologues. This is important to understand. A dialogue is a conversation, and the reason you're having a conversation is you're prepared to 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 see what the other person has to say about this. And what is on the stand for discussion here is Quranism in that dialogue. It's not other points. It's not, well, what would you have to say about, for example, such and such thing? It's actually, it's this topic, Quranist only. And is this a viable means? And I think the discussion really did show that it's not. And I mean, from my perspective, I'm kind of done with Quranists. That's my kind of where I'm at. I'm not really interested in them. I never was really. I had no idea who Muhammad was. And it's a really good idea. I mean, it's a really good element that I had no idea who he was. Otherwise, if I'd just seen the other clips that he'd just been arguing and calling people non-stop mushriks and calling Muslims, most of Muslims, idolaters and calling all pagans, and I would have not even had that conversation with him. I would have not even brought him up on the platform. So I'm glad, alhamdulillah, I hadn't watched anything and thereby did allow him a conversation. So but it really, I feel it proved my point that this Quranism is really just an inverted form of hard wing, almost Khawarij Salafism. So if you look at not just regular Salafis, but like the far right, the right wing, hard line, Khawarij kind of Wahhabis that we have, and I'm using the term Wahhabis especially for that, such a group like that. I'm not referring to regular Salafis. This Quranist movement is an inverse of that. They are exactly them, but here they just reject hadith. So it comes off, there is an element of cognitive dissonance. Because when a person joins or when a person comes across it, they assume, you see, and I mentioned this in my discussion, that you assume that maybe these people are coming from a place of passion, a place of compassion, but they're not, right? They are really just, right, they are really just coming from a place of rage, anger, hate, even maybe just trauma that feel they've been done onto, that they are the new saved sect of Islam. Everybody else is an mushrik. is a idolater and everybody else is a pagan. And right, so all of this stuff, yeah, it just goes to show, it really just proves the point. And but khair, I am glad, and in my thoughts on the discussion were that it did go very well, as far as the discussion could have possibly gone. Because once again, if you take a look at Brother MFG's regular dialogues, they seem to just be nothing but a shouting. So you can tell based on that, I was actually not out of line, because to compare something, you have to look at like for like. So if you see a lot of his other discussions, they're just shouting. He's just shouting, the other person shouting. So relatively speaking, this was quite a success. In this discussion, we did look at a few key central themes. One, okay, how do you respond to certain verses? Two, right, so which Brother Muhammad gave a response, and that was, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for, well, how do you respond? What are your reflections? And he gave those reflections. I was quite caught off guard with how, and I understand this may not be their intention, but how apparently appears that how disrespectful they come off to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I was very caught off guard with that. I didn't expect that at all. That, this not being a mercy for the world. I didn't know this argument of this. I didn't even that was a complete surprise to me in the dialogue. So and I had to stop Brother Muhammad and say, look, please don't carry on with this, because I've got a feeling this is going to go down a road where you're going to start becoming more disrespectful to the Prophet. And then I'm not going to engage this conversation at all. So because he made some analogy that if the Prophet just sat at home and just did something, and I just thought, wait, we're Muslims here. So let's, we're not even, this is not going to happen. Okay. So that caught me entirely off guard. However, that said, the responses to the generic verses, see, the verses, it was fine that Brother Muhammad gave his thoughts and reflections, and that's what I'm asking him to do. What surprised me is the whole Quranist movement is based on every person can come to the Quran and take what it speaks to them. Yet, when we're discussing verses with valid interpretations, like when we said the verse that قَدْ جَاءَكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ نُورٌ وَكِتَابٌ مُبِينٌ, that what does nur here mean? And some Mufassirin have said it means the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which I would say it means the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some people have said it means the nur of guidance. And you could say, I mean, they don't usually say it's speaking about the Quran, but okay, Brother MFG felt it was speaking about the Quran, which is fine. But then, almost in a rage, he denounced every other valid and primary interpretation as going against the Quran, and therefore almost kufr, because it's going against the Quran. And so, once again, you're seeing that very Khawarij understanding of that everybody else is not a believer, or they're off, they're all corrupt. We are the saved sect. And somebody here had said that Mufti, they said allegedly Mufti does that. I'm not aware that I've ever done something like that where I've said that I'm the saved sect and all these other interpretations. In fact, my whole thing has been about welcoming people to a diverse approach. And yeah, so that really surprised me, those interpretations. Then I think what really bothered the Quranist movement, and especially I think Brother Muhammad, what really bothered them is when we took the dialogue to the application of Salah, of Islam. So we took it to Salah and Saum. Now, in Salah, when Brother Muhammad started to give a description, and if you watch I did watch my whole thing back to see how was I being? Now, because people were saying, oh, you're talking over it, but this was really just people who I could tell were just hardline Quranists and just upset. And khair, so I watched it. Now, the moment he starts to give his description of the salah, I do ask him that, could you just give I say something like 60 seconds, an overview from beginning to end of how your salah looks like. Now, that conversation went on, it went on for quite a while. And in a way, I'm glad it did, because in that, Brother Muhammad's whole thing, I feel, fell apart. And this is what really bothered a lot of the Quranists, because, look, I said this the week before when we spoke on our meetup, that a person should have like worthy adversaries, opponents. Ash-shahadatu ma shahidat bihi al-a'da. And you should have the kind of fortitude to accept as well certain things. There's a grace, there's almost a heroism in that as well. And you could tell, although I'm sure they're not going to accept this, that the whole Quranist argument, unfortunately, with quite humiliation on their part, fell apart as he began to explain the Salah. Any person watching that, I could tell, was deeply embarrassed at how Brother Muhammad was representing the Quranists. Because, this thing of just saying, I pray Salah however it feels to me in the moment. I do. And I had no idea, by the way, but as I approached that conversation, I had no idea how Brother Muhammad prays his Salah. So I didn't know what he was going to say. I assumed he was going to say that Salah is not a ritual. Some Quranists say that, there is no such thing as Salah. It's just a remembrance in the heart. So I, for some reason, assumed he was going to say that. But he didn't. And he went on to say something which really, I think, decimated his own argument of Quranism and just showed how weak Quranism is as a whole. So, because he went on to say, well, I pray 3 times a day. And then when I said, okay, can you describe the Salah? The description of the Salah was so arbitrary. It was like, well, I begin by A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. And why do you begin with A'udhu Billah? There's nothing in the Quran that says when you're going to recite the Quran. So he could say, well, because I'm going to recite the Quran. Okay, fine. But you would assume that the verse of the Quran says, ذَكَرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ فَصَلَّى. He mentions the name of his Lord and then prays, begins Salah. So, khair, he says, then he reads Fatiha, because it is the best dua in the Quran. First of all, where does it say in the Quran that Fatiha is the best dua in the Quran? I'm not negating it, but it doesn't say that in the Quran. Secondly, why Fatiha? Because that is how Muslims pray. So really, it's just doing what other Muslims do, but having such a problem with the tradition. And so he says, well, because it's just arbitrary. And then I, don't do ruku. I just go straight into sujood. And I say, do you do 1 sajda, 2 sajdas? Just do 1, but it depends on the day. Do you do a 2 rak'ah? Depends on the mood and the feeling and the iman in that particular moment. Sometimes I pray 3, sometimes I pray 1, sometimes I pray. You could see this is just embarrassing. So embarrassing that is not a tradition that could be taught. That's just, so ad hoc and haphazard. Then you might as well just not have a system having a system that reads there is no system. It's not a system. So you see, Islam doesn't leave things to feelings, because feelings are the worst things to be consistent with. You need, the whole purpose of discipline is to override feelings. That you don't, if I just leave it to how I feel, then people aren't going to feel like anything. They're not going to feel like wanting to do anything. So this, let's just leave it to how you feel on the day. It's a very, modern this philosophy, isn't it? In Sapiens, he really covers, there's a good chapter on this in the book Sapiens, that this modern notion of how you feel, it's such a farce. He really breaks this down, that go do what your heart says. What does this mean? No, people, one of the biggest problems is people have no idea what they want. And people's feelings are the biggest impediment to their life's journey. Because most people feel miserable, most people feel like failures, most people feel disengaged, they feel disenchanted, most people feel confused. So leaving it to your feelings, this is, and he might say, well, by feeling I mean my level of iman, how my iman feels. But that once again, so I think in that dialogue there, when we shifted the second part, when we started speaking about application of salah, it really fell apart, embarrassingly. And this was my point, that look, let's have a dialogue, because if you can stand the test of time, I will want you to steel man your case, but with it steel manned, it will fall apart. That was my da'wah. And such, is what happened and manifested. So then we went on to Saum. And in Saum, once again, I just asked a simple question: what is it that invalidates the fast? And the usual eating, drinking, sexual intercourse. And I said, well, could you just show me the verse of the Quran that clearly says that? And the verse of the Quran does not clearly say it. It does say it, but it doesn't. It says it through by implying it without saying it. So now that's interesting, because somebody who goes by the Quranist alone movement and was denying a moment ago in that dialogue other readings, in this verse of the Quran that they're relying on, the Quran does not explicitly teach the rulings of what to abstain from. So, but what it does is it implies it. And that's fine, but it was the reason why that was the problem for Brother MFG is because he was denying all other extrapolations, other people's interpretations. So yeah, overall, I do feel that when it was very well, it proved the point. However, it also really reaffirmed what I said at the preface, that to me, the Quran only movement is a movement coming from a place of rage, from a place of anger, from hurt and trauma. That this is not a solution for Muslims. It's a very not thought through response. It's something very haphazard, it's very emotional, and it is actually an inverse reality of the Khawarij right wing kind of Salafis. It is exactly just an inverse reality of that. So they're exactly the same, but they here just reject hadith. And this is interesting, and I mentioned this there, that you see people who take a more balanced approach, that say, like, and I gave the solution, which is to do with tradition, where we accept the Sunnah, and Sunnah does not equate to hadith, and hadith have to meet the three criteria. You see, such people that in those cases reject certain hadith, like Imam Malik did and many ulama coming down do, they often reject the hadith coming from a place of compassion and love for the deen and a following of the sunnah. So they find something clashing. And I mentioned that even when I did Bukhari Gate, and I had a series years ago called Hadith That Insult Islam. See, is in the title that insult Islam, that these hadith were disrespectful to the Prophet ﷺ, so they could not be a hadith. That the whole angle and energy was coming from a place of love and honor for the Prophet ﷺ and other prophets before us. It was not coming from a place of rage. So that's a key difference. Like the hadith that, for example, we find, and I find it disrespectful to the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, where they try to say he had some kind of an illness to do with his astaghfirullah genitals. Now, I find that very disrespectful, what the Israelites were saying about Moses. And I refuse to accept that the Prophet ﷺ would have said something like that. So this hadith would have been something coming down through the Israelite tradition and misplaced as a hadith. So things like this, you see, we were the age of Aisha, things that were disrespectful to the honor of the Prophet ﷺ, we stood up for, not coming from a place of anger and rage. Right, so that said, yeah, so overall, that's in summary, I'm glad it happened, but I'm not really interested in this whole movement. And let it be. The reason I was very glad is because when I saw other clips later after my dialogue, I did see the need that many people wanted this brother to have had a dialogue with a Muslim representative or a Muslim scholar or a Muslim thinker. And many of them weren't having it with him and some of them that were, it was just an shouting, arguing. And so in that sense, I guess that job has been done. Right, let's see. I shared out the link. And right, and if anybody wants to tune in, click like, click share. I will just add a brief point that I didn't take it down the argument of trying to, which I do feel is an argument, but I didn't take it down the argument of, you see, because you're problematizing hadith, Quran is transmitted similarly. Reason being is that it may have some truths, and in part it's not true that the Quran was transmitted very differently from father to child. It was transmitted en masse as a collective movement. It wasn't transmitted the same way. Hadith was transmitted in a more niche, but there are some parallels. So even though there's some truths there, the other thing was, what I didn't want to do was, I didn't want to by any means bring about I don't want people to drag the Quran down just because they have a problem with something else. Like, let's say if somebody's got a problem with hadith, what we don't want to do is bring the Quran there and say, well, okay, now you've got a problem with the Quran as well. I don't want to, because you see, that's not really the approach of, we should never have that approach as Muslims. Just as if somebody's disrespecting something, we shouldn't say, well, oh, then what do you say about the Prophet who did? Because then in that way, you're kind of bringing the Prophet down as well. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So we as Muslims should never do things like that. And so that's why that was never part of the dialogue. And I never responded with such kind of arguments. All right. Okay. We I've got some people joining. Should we have some thoughts? What is right? I just want to say here, right? I was just about to bring on a guest, but I saw this comment and I thought, let me just respond to that. Look, I don't want to say stuff like this. Quranists, I do feel the whole movement to be, like I said, misplaced energy in a place coming from rage and trauma. But I don't like this thought of saying and I completely disagree with saying they're not Muslims. They are Muslims, and they're on a journey just like everyone else. What I don't want is I don't want a hatred towards people who are Quranists. I don't want a rage against people like that. They're on a journey. I do feel, look, everybody somewhere along the way, they've, like many people, they've probably been hurt with something. We've all been hurt, you understand? And they've probably been hurt with something. Somebody's probably been cruel to them. They've probably used hadith to be cruel to them. This has made them turn away from hadith as a whole. I bet with maybe 80% of them, it's something like that, which really is a shame that the people who try to shove Islam down their throat using certain hadith, they are at fault, really. The Prophet never taught Islam like this. So what I don't want is this angle of they're somehow non-Muslims, they're somehow kuffar. They're not. They are Muslims. They are our brothers and sisters. We may disagree in our approach, but wallahi, from my heart, I feel that as life progresses for them and they heal with whatever hurt they have, they will just kind of realign to a bit more of a balanced approach. That's what I feel. I don't My purpose of the dialogue was to show the weakness of the arguments, by allowing the interlocutor to present his case, in this case, Brother Muhammad, and steelman it, and thereby it's still falling apart. That was my purpose, and that did happen, but it was not to kind of excommunicate and anathematize and to say these people are somehow out of Islam, or no, let's not do that. This is why I'm against this whole debating culture. Khair. Right, let's bring on some. I've got Hussein here. Hussein, let me ask. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
All
I'm
right,
good,
that's a loud
Mufti.
mic.
Oh, sorry.
I like it. No, it's fine. I can adjust it from here now, I believe. They've given us
How's
some.
that?
Let's see. What's your? Yeah, hopefully should be okay.
Test.
Yeah, it should be fine. But yeah, so what is going on, Hussein, and how is life down under?
Alhamdulillah, life is good, Mufti. Life is good. Just
Allahu Akbar. All right,
rolling with
how
the
have you?
punch.
Allah, has to be done, I guess. Has to be done. How have you been since your whole journey, shall I say?
Oh, let's just say things in the Quran make more sense after that journey. So when the Quran's talking about God and describing God as light, when the Quran's talking about how God sent the Quran and the light, let's just say these interpretations are both literal and metaphorical.
Yeah, it is true that there are. I felt, in my own journeys of people, when I'd encountered what is really medicine, sacred medicine, I would feel, psychedelics. In my own journey, I felt what it did for me, what they did for me, the journeys, is I can only share, one can only share their own experience. And this is qualitative, as opposed to quantitative, that it took almost faith from a 2D perspective and made it 3D. That's the best. Like, I don't know if that makes sense to people, but that's what it did for me as a person.
Oh yeah.
It makes to me, what it did was it also, for the first time, I experienced existence without a body. I experienced consciousness, that being without this body, and thereby you almost add a solidified layer to this belief of life after death. Like, all of a sudden, life after death becomes so, like, you believed in it anyway, but now it becomes so real. It's like, damn, like you feel that you've seen a trailer, like an actual trailer of existence in the barzakh. And yeah, it's something which, it is ineffable. It's what words can't describe. And it really does change people, it boosts a sense of spirituality. It brings to life mysticism. It boosts empathy, your love and compassion. I don't know if you've found this, but over time, like, I found that my empathy side of things, it's like I don't been on steroids, and that can
It's
sometimes.
true.
Yeah, have you found? Do you? Damn, do you?
Oh, definitely. Especially so before that, I've been doing kickboxing for my whole life, so it's very hard sport, you either make it or you don't. And maybe I also took that outside in my personal life. And after this experience, you just become very much more empathetic, to what people are going through. And you really let go of a lot of your own materialistic possessions, and you go, oh, I put it at this level and now it's at this level. But I know other people, they still have it at this level. So now it's a lot more understanding of people's perspectives and where they're at. And
Yeah, like, I find that, over these last few years, with a lot of things, with life experiences as well, but unquestionably, what psychedelics does, like, somebody had asked here that where's the question? Why do you need psychedelics for experiential knowledge? You see, I think the key word there is in the knowing, what knowing means. And this is why I said, before, but it took it from 2D to experiencing. So it's a bit like saying, well, you studied an apple, but then tasting the apple will always be very different to just studying it. You could be an expert on apples. Like, let's say you've studied all, like, about seeds and what makes the apple seed unique and how it grows and how it kind of, the roots shoot out in the tree and how the tree goes through its cycles and how apples develop and ripen, and you could learn the names of the variety of apples. But imagine but that's all experience could be in this world. It cannot be that you've tasted the apple. And then there comes a person who also tastes it. Now, there is a qualitative gulf between those two knowings. Both know about apples, unquestionably. But the person who, and this is why this tradition of mysticism, it was called the Ahl al-Dhawq, the people who've tasted, the people who taste. Because the tasting was the experiencing. They've experienced the you know the reality that Allah has kind of bestowed upon them, really, by allowing them to. So it's not, and from a biological perspective, from a psychological perspective, you see, you have to understand how, first of all, consciousness and the brain operate. That I do believe the brain is like a reductive valve for consciousness. It kind of reduces the power of consciousness on the brain. It's kind of like bringing it into, it's like almost reducing it, narrowing it, so we can function, we can operate in this dunya. Otherwise, we would just be overwhelmed, I feel, as humans. And what's important to learn is how neurons in the brain fire, because they initially, the first time you do something, they take arbitrary pathways. We have billions and billions of connections in the brain. Now, the connections, like, let's say you had to solve something in life, like you had a problem, you had to solve it. The neuron will fire, and it will just do it arbitrarily. It will not always take the best or most effective route, but it will just fire in a particular way. Now, let's say you solve, or you deal with a problem and your neurons are fired. Next time you face similar problems, they will take that same pathway. So it says that neurons that fire together wire together. So that may not be the most effective pathway. And if you think about it, a lot of our pathways are developed when we were kids. We weren't even the most well adapted to handle problems. So those pathways, we're still using them as adults. And an analogy that somebody gave, I really enjoy this analogy. He said it was like, you've got, like, let's say a mountain that's like covered, draped in snow, and you've got these kind of like pathways, like, let's say something's rolled down and it's made a path through the snow, like a snowball has rolled down and it's made these pathways, and there's different snowballs. So you've got these, so whenever a snowball forms, it takes that pathway now. And he said, and what psychedelics does is it kind of somehow just shakes everything just becomes equal snow again. So you've got, a fresh start. And that was an analogy, but what it's actually doing is it's millions and millions of pathways it's creating, millions. And in that instant, so this is why you all of a sudden become sometimes much better at problem solving, because you've developed millions of new synaptic connections, which another person could develop, but really they've got to go through so much to develop it. And sometimes you can't, it's difficult to rewire a new connection because the old one is so strong. Yeah. That was, sorry, response. I was just get carried away in responding, but yeah.
Well, one of the coolest things I have noticed since that is, when you read the works of people like Rumi, you start to actually understand what he's communicating. So there's that famous story of him going through the marketplace, and then the blacksmith, he's beating on the steel, ting, 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 and then Rumi, he starts spinning. And through the spinning, now we know it is actually a way to induce DMT through the human body. And as he's spinning and as the blacksmith is stinging, he starts having a spiritual experience. Now, I remember hearing this story before, and I go, yeah, well, it makes no sense to me. I totally can't understand it. But now, you know what he's saying. You know exactly what he's communicating. And people like Ibn Arabi, not that I know much about him, but, when, for example, you're discussing him through your series earlier, you can now understand what the man's trying to communicate. Because a lot of people, after you come out from your own experience, you start thinking, how can I put this into words? And then you look at those that have attempted to put it into words earlier, and they're using the best words to describe it, better than what I could come up with. And then you go, oh, now I see the challenge of trying to describe the apple to someone that's never tasted the apple.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And you see, in fact, the definition, from William James, the father of modern psychology, on the mystical experience, is they put in the acronym PINT. So they would say that the experience has a passivity, it has an ineffability, it has a noetic quality to it, and it's transient. That passivity in the sense that it will overcome you, like you cannot resist it. It is overwhelming. And the fact that it is ineffable, you can't really put it into words. I mean, you can try, but it doesn't really make sense to the person who's not experienced what you're saying. Really, there are just two camps. There's those who have experienced and those who haven't. And those who haven't will never truly understand those who have. And that is the truth of the matter. It's like the person who's never tasted the apple just has not tasted it. They may always have a fear that apples carry parasites and apples are dangerous as well. Such and such person, they will have anecdotes. Such and such person choked on an apple. Apple was the fall of humanity with Adam. Apple was, the symbol of global commercial capitalism. Apple is, I mean, you could just take an apple as an example and we could come up with so many things here in the moment. But there will always be such a chasm between the two groups, that those who have experienced and those who haven't. And the N in PINT was a noetic quality, that you come back with a kind of knowing. Now, this knowing is not necessarily information. It's more gnosis. It's like ma'rifah. It's not so much ilm in the sense of ma'lumat. It's not like, oh, Paris is the capital of France, or the algebraic equation for this is this, or this is how the DNA code is made. It's not that kind of a knowing to do with information. It's more a gnosis, a realization, like a ma'rifah. And the T is the transient nature, meaning that the trip, the journey comes to an end. It's not a psychosis. It's not something that is you because in the moment, yes, in the experience, you have disconnected from reality in ways that are similar to a psychosis. Although a psychosis is negative and this is positive, but the fact that you have disconnected from this simulated reality, if you like. But unlike a mental health disorder, this is transient. This, as the medicine stops, it stops. You come out of it. And that is also, this is how psychologists, and beginning with William James, they categorize the mystical experience as something, and you see it transforms. The noetic quality was that the knowledge that they have, the gnosis, it changes their lives. Yeah.
And to anyone out there thinking they should do it, just make sure you are prepared, is all I would say. I know a few people that have done it and they went in unprepared and there's no benefit, or the benefit is very minimal, or their mindset wasn't correct. They were very skeptical of it and therefore did not gain any benefit. So it's like anything, if you want to make a cake, you need to be prepared. You got to have the ingredients in the right amount and the right measurements, and then it goes into the oven. You don't just buy your 1 kilo of everything and throw it in there and go, well, it didn't work. This is all blah blah blah. Obviously it's not going to work. So
well said. Yeah. No, I totally second that. And I would say to people, because people say, should I do this? I say that I don't tell people to do it. I say that the path has a calling of its own. It calls people who it calls. If it's not your thing, You're not feeling it, don't do it. It's like, and that's exactly the nature of it. And people sometimes say that, look, that could it be dangerous? I mean, there's no known fatality ever from any psychedelics, including the most powerful on earth. There's never been a known fatality. But whereas people are dying all the time, people are dying from cigarettes. Most ulama say cigarettes are not haram. That people are dying from driving. There's the amount of car accidents you're having per year that you see deaths. People are dying. And what I'm trying to say is there will always be a caution with everything. There will always be a preparation for everything. There is a certain thoughtfulness that goes into anything. Imagine somebody asks you, should I go to the gym? And you say, yeah, like Hussein, for many years you've been a kickboxer. Somebody says, oh, should I take up kickboxing? You say, yeah, take it up. Now they get smacked in the head and it severely, let's say, impairs them. Now, obviously, that's not what you mean by it. And that's generally not what would happen. But it's not to say, like anything, like somebody could ask me, should I go to the gym? I say, yeah. Now they go and they end up doing something and it herniates a disc in their spine. So they say, well, this person said we should go to the gym. Firstly, like anything, there is a kind of protocol with anything. These things should never be done unsupervised. They should never be done without guidance. You should always be, there should be a guide. There should be people who are very, with great sophistication trained in these things that guide you through. You yourself should be prepared, as you were saying, Hussein. You should have a kind of mindset to that you are going for, that there's this healing that you are going for. One thing I would say is put aside the mystical experience, put aside the spirituality. The biggest thing it does in this dunya is it heals trauma. And so many of us are carrying trauma. And that trauma is difficult to heal. Like, you can heal trauma through other methods as well. You can go through therapy, you can, work on your mindfulness, mental health. But a lot of people, to face their own trauma, it's hard for them. Because usually a trauma is built up through childhood, it's built up through, developing years, sometimes maybe in adulthood, maybe there's been incidents with people, maybe they've been, like I've known people who've been victims of all sorts of atrocities, from violence to tragedies like rape. I've known people who've been victims, and to overcome and heal through that has been very difficult for them, very difficult. So psychedelics has been something that has, in those particular cases that I've been aware of, has healed those people. Now, so it is not just, you see, the spiritual side, it will manifest. It is something like your niyyah. It's a bit like, the Tabligis would say that you have to make a niyyah. And they're so right, because the medicine kind of reads your intention. There's a saying that it doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you need. It's so true, isn't it?
Very true.
And if you have these wounds, it will go to work on them. And I think, putting the spirituality aside, putting the mysticism aside, putting the religious thing aside, the trauma is the most important element, because hurt people. See, people who carry a lot of hurt within them are usually people that go on to hurt other people. Yeah. That's what do you feel about that, Hussein? What about things like trauma? And maybe you came across people who had experienced trauma and it helped them heal and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got too much to comment on that because you said everything, Mufti. This is a way to get over that trauma, and no matter what it is, and everyone that done it, they talked about what the traumatic experience, and I might be sitting there go, that's not a traumatic experience, so but to that individual, they needed this to get over that, to move forward in their life. There was a number of people with relationship breakdowns, and they used this to try and move forward from that. And here I am, big tough man going, relationship, blah, 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 thinking to myself, but so it's all on a scale. And there's only, I just find there's only so much, thinking you can do late at night in your bed thinking this is like a real healing. And that's why it's called medicine at the end of the day. It's not something they just coined 50 years ago. It's been called medicine for over 1,000 years.
Yeah, this practice has been going on for several thousands of years. Right back to, you've got it in things like the hieroglyphs from the time of the pharaohs, where they've got the blue lily plant. You've got in the South American kind of shamanic cultures, you've got heritage going back through memories and oral kind of traditions that date back millennia, 1 to 2, 3, maybe possibly 2,000 to 3,000 years. So yeah, and I do feel, I agree with what you're saying, that trauma is also relative to the individual. Some trauma would be trauma for everyone, I'm sure, but then beyond that, people would disagree. I mean, they would react differently. So it is trauma is when you are faced with a situation in which you are entirely helpless, like a tragic situation in which you find yourself entirely helpless. The brain generates trauma. So that could have been for somebody like a car accident. It could have been for somebody, an assault. It could have been much worse. It could have been witnessing something. It could have even been things like being broken down as a kid, having your confidence shattered, being told you're useless, you're pathetic, being told you're ugly, being told you're like these kind of things. You don't know, like to some people, they might be more thick-skinned. And somebody could say, well, this happened to me, I'm fine. To another person, they became a recluse. They struggled to make friends. They had a low self-esteem. So it is relative, and it is a wound, and the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah says that, that ma anzal Allahu da'an, that there was no wound or illness or ailment, illa wa anzala lahu shifa'an, except Allah sent a cure to heal it. Alimahu man alim wa jahilahu man jahil. Those who became aware of it became aware of it, and those who remained ignorant remained ignorant. Now that is a beauty in that, because it is really, that's what it is, a healing, a kind of a love for the world. And sometimes we see, right now, with the rise of fascism around the world, we're seeing a lot of kind of populist, right-wing, fascistic kind of trends and waves. And I'm sure it's over there as well in Australia. I was saying it's here in the UK, it's in the US, it's in Europe, it's it's in places like India. It's in, like, people, they're becoming like very, there's this rise of this mob groupthink and a very fascistic kind of racist. A lot of this as well, I feel, in addition to people having to, prepare and stand firm wherever they are, but in addition to that, I do feel, see, that's a reaction, but that's not the cure. I do feel the underlying matter with a lot of these people is a pain and a hurt and a wound that they have in their hearts. that is something to do with something mostly entirely different, but it's being channeled here with this hate. And something like psychedelics, in an age where we're seeing more and more hate, it is exactly what deals with that. It is something that promotes love. Even, the thing about it, it's like a wave, it's a flood. Even if you don't want to, it's like a wave of love. It just takes you away regardless. You don't get a say in it. You could be like a miserable person and it'll just turn you into some
Oh, jeez. Mufti, just real quick, I don't want to take up too much time. I just wanted to ask, I got to crack my fingers, mate. Got to ask some questions about last week's discussion. Okay,
sure, go for it. Let's go for it. Let's go for it.
Do you know what MFG's, in a couple of sentences, what his position actually is?
Do I know what it is now or before?
Yeah. No, now.
Before I did. Yeah, so now what I've understood is that he clearly, out of principle, denies hadith, not out of epistemology, out of principle. Not only does he deny hadith, he denies the entire Muslim tradition, the Islamic tradition, and also feels that it is a kind of it is almost akin to idolatry, because it is people coming up with, this verse of the Quran, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. They took their scholars and priests, their leaders, to become lords. A kind of a literal reading of that verse. But the irony is, you see, him and this isn't a personal attack to Brother MFG, but that group themselves are coming to the Quran with their opinions and their interpretation. So ironically, it's kind of, there's an irony in it, that you're denying other people's interpretation, but you are affirming your own. And this was my point when I said to him that, look, do you feel reason, the voice of reason, has a role in engaging revelation? And he said, yes, of course. So I said, so by that logic, like, if your interpretation, your understanding means something, then surely the 1400 years of scholarship is equally valuable. Like, even if we don't agree with it all, but it must be valuable. There must be people who've thought, like, if I feel my engagement is valuable, then there must have been thousands upon thousands of people, if not millions, who've had more insights than me.
Sure. I mean, look, in short, their position is, guidance comes from the Quran. So your halal and haram would come from the Quran. Your validators and invalidators would come from the Quran. Your legal rulings are derived from the Quran. And anything outside from that, it is not necessary for your salvation. Okay. No. The point that you made on Salah, okay, when you say it's arbitrary, see, this is something, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I don't, because I remember when I went through, learning the validators and invalidators of Salah, and this sort of a Shafi'i Imam, and he was saying, 3 scratches in 1 rak'ah will invalidate your Salah. But if you do, you can do 10 in total, like you can do 2 each rak'ah, get up to 8, and it's not going to invalidate. But if you do one long one, that's fine. You can each for 5 minutes. Okay, so, but this is a man telling me that this will invalidate. So Allah will not accept your Salah if I scratch myself more than 3 times in 1 rak'ah. But if I do 2 and stop on the 3rd, and then the next 2, I can do another 2. So is this not also arbitrary?
Yeah, no, and that was my point. By the way, what I wasn't, so I was saying about the arbitrary nature, as in, it seemed he had put together some arbitrary method to pray. But I totally agree with you that this is, I find it silly, these kind of rulings. I find that saying there's almost an infantilization of God. There is you're almost treating without, I know it's not done intentionally, but to the observer, there is an infantilization. It's like as if I'm treating God as though I would treat an infant, Oh, it's okay because, because my finger stayed there and I kept scratching for 2 whole minutes. That just counts as one. So I'm okay. But if oh, damn, my salah's broken. This is how I suppose the logic to I don't know what, like a 6-year-old or like who what kind of logic is this? It's a very almost like, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but it's like on the spectrum reading of it's a quite a like an it's almost with a sense of like what's the better word, neurodivergence, that's it, for autistic. It's like an autistic reading of and this is not in any way, I don't mean it as a disrespect to anybody with autism. May Allah make things easy for everyone, especially for them as well. I mean it, that's how the reading is, because surely that's not what Islam, anybody can tell that just sounds, or anybody should be able to tell, that sounds silly. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. And this was my point, that look, and you get more absurd things in fiqh, by the way. That's you've said a very nice, a humorous example. There's silly examples in fiqh. But that was my whole point, that look, when we say the Islamic tradition, we mean people who've contributed to the tradition under the Islamic banner. So they've come as Islamic scholars and they've put forward rulings. You take what's good, you leave what isn't. This was my whole point, that what you don't need to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater, only to reproduce a new version yourself. So, like, in essence, what you're doing is saying, look, let's reinvent the wheel ourselves and do the same thing. But you could just say, well, look, okay, we've got these rulings. Okay, that sounds silly. That sounds silly. This sounds fine. I'll just go with that. It's not. That's how that is a much more mature way to deal with things.
So, with their position, you'll find that if someone was to pray as the vast majority of Muslims do pray, it is as per the Quran says as well, so it's not contradictory to it.
Yeah.
But they're just saying, you cannot tell me that 3 scratches would be an invalidator.
Yeah, because you see, this is my point, that look, people have come up with these opinions based on ijtihadat. I'm not denying that these opinions and rulings are not based on ijtihad. They are. But in many cases, you would entirely reject that ruling. Like, it would feel, sure, the person's come up with this ruling because they feel like what they're saying is that, okay, what they seem to be doing is a very almost like an autistic reading. Like, okay, we're going to go as if this is purely legalistic. So the way to be legalistic is we remove any kind of human reasoning. We're just going to look at just pure legality. So, okay, what would constitute not many? One would be not many linguistically. Okay, what else could be not many? Okay, in Arabic, 3 is plural and 2 is not plural in Arabic, right? So in Arabic, you have a dual noun as well, and you have a plural. So, okay, so 2 would also be not many by a linguistic. Like, imagine you're a machine reading this. So you say, okay, many is plural, and whatever is not plural is not many then. So, sorry, many is plural, which is 3. So anything under 3 is not many. So 1 and 2. So, okay, so 1 or 2 actions, therefore, are not considered invalidating. It's a very like a machine-like reading of like a robotic reading. In the real world, in practice, it's quite infantile. It's very childish and silly almost.
So if you take this example and we remove it, and you also take away other invalidators and remove them, then you sort of do work back to their position of iqamatu salat.
You see, I wasn't disagreeing with, I mean, I was disagreeing with when it came to the Quranist salah, I was disagreeing with the element of you don't have no structure, you just do as you feel. That I found that just absurd, because that would never work. You need a system. I wasn't disagreeing with the fact that he, for example, chose to read Fatiha, or he chose to, because that was arbitrary. Sure, but my point in saying that is, you see, you've resorted to non-Quran to establish this. That was the point of my argument. My argument was not saying that, oh, you've got something arbitrary, because many people have arbitrary things in their fiqh, but you too have just done what you've condemned them of doing. So you've condemned the Muslim tradition because you feel it's arbitrary, and you feel you cannot go outside of the Quran to establish things. But then you yourself have established a tradition which is arbitrary and outside of the Quran. So to me, that it's, the whole thing was humorous, because that's an ironic. So that's what I was pointing out, not the fact that it was arbitrary was the problem, but that because it's arbitrary, you refute yourself. Do you see my angle? So I wasn't necessarily saying, I was critical of him having no structure in Salah. I found that, like absurd, because I found it like saying, well, you just, I feel like praying 3, I feel like praying 2, I feel like praying 1. Like, to me, that was, I think, what even he, once again, I'm assuming here, but I imagine he even regretted saying that, because it looked very embarrassing to say. Because, there's some things when you say them out loud, they sound, and you think, I don't know, for some reason, sounded a lot better in my head.
I hear what you're saying, okay, but to me, how is that any different to if I was just to pray, for example, my 3 Maghrib, do 2 Sunnah, and then I just feel like doing 2 Sunnah, 2 Sunnah, 2 Sunnah just for the next 30 minutes?
So it's different in the sense that, you see, you have a structure. You're operating, in that case, within a structure, within a system. So, for example, there is a system that teaches you Salah looks like this. So if you look at the Hadith, now obviously they don't accept Hadith, but even the Quran hints at this. The whole definition of Salah is given as though it's like a building, like a structure. Like even the term Iqamatu Salah is about establishing usually what is a building, Iqama, like you kind of establish a kind of structure. Now, and in the Hadith, it mentions Salah as though it has pillars and things like this. So you are teaching, let's say you're teaching your children, or you're teaching people a system that, okay, this is how you pray, this has this many rak'ah, this has this, and you can pray. So for example, you can pray nafal in 2 rak'at. Now you can pray as many as you like, you decide to pray, like you said, so many after Maghrib, or you don't. That's very different to saying something like, that's quite anarchical in the sense that you say, like, let's say your child asks you, okay, how do I pray? You say, well, you just stand and then you go into sajda, and says, okay, what do I do then? Well, you just, how you're feeling. How are you feeling? Do you want to get back up? And the child says, I don't know. Do I have to get up? Well, I don't know. How do you feel? This system just won't work, because it's not a system. So that will collapse. Forget your child. It will collapse with you. This does not have the fuel to move forward. So that's why I was saying that is very, unlike if you have a system. Look, even if a person has a system where they don't let's say a person doesn't pray. Most Muslims in the world don't pray 5 times a day, but they have a system in their mind. Now, when they are to, like, let's say they feel, oh, you know what, I should actually start praying. They have a structure that they can go back to. Having this very, this kind of like go with what your heart feels, it doesn't, like, it's difficult. Like I'm telling you this, it's very inoperable and dysfunctional. I would say for, I would argue for probably even, 99% of mankind would not be able to operate in a way like that, because human beings need structure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, so with that all said and done, I'm just trying to wrap this up real quick.
Sure.
Their position of sort of what I just said earlier, I can reiterate it if you want, or don't need. Is it enough for salvation then, in your opinion?
Right. Oh, as in salvation in the eyes of Allah, you mean, like, as in for the... Look, I'm not here to lay any claims about in the eyes of Allah. Obviously, I personally do like, as far as a fiqhi reading of their salah, I feel that from a fiqhi perspective doesn't stand. It's like very, but I wouldn't, like, let's say now Brother Muhammad prays like that, because that's what he said he prays like, or he said he did Hajj a month before the rest of the Muslims did Hajj. He did it in Dhul Qa'dah. Now, I'm not, to me, from a fiqhi perspective, if you're teaching fiqh, you would say, okay, that's how it's not done. This is how it is done. However, I don't believe we are here to say, for example, in the eyes of Allah, this person's worship doesn't mean anything. I'm sure it means just as much as worship is concerned in the eyes of Allah. Because look, he said he stays in sujood crying for like 1 to 2 hours. I mean, I can only imagine the kind of heartfelt effect that's having. And I'm embarrassed. I don't pray like that, and I don't. I'm embarrassed to say that it's not. Unfortunately, my state of salah is not in such a heightened iman that I'm in sujood for 1 hour and things like this. I'm not, and I'm not going to pretend I am. Right. So, from that aspect, his bond with Allah, from that aspect, may be far greater than mine and many other people, and I applaud that. From a fiqh, I just feel it's a misplaced application of Islam. I'm not here to say what does Allah think of his worship, because look, Allah says in the Quran that your actions don't reach me per se. When you slaughter the animals and you do this, the animals, their blood, these things don't reach us. Nusuki, that what reaches Allah is the devotion. So does the devotion reach Allah? I hope it does. However, that is to me misapplied. But so that's how I would answer this question. I know many people may answer by trying to say, oh, well, they're going to hell for this and they're doing this. No, I would not. Like, I feel that is a very wrong attitude to engage this whole thing. That, look, heaven and hell and salvation are in the hands of Allah. Human beings endeavor. We have devotion.
I got to wrap it up. Mufti, that was actually it, or I had to ask. Stay blessed.
Sure. No, shukran. Saying, take care of yourself. Speak soon. People, that was our beloved Husayn, arrived from Australia. We have, what is the time? You know what? Let's see. Right. Can we take on a few people without... right. I've got here. Let me just take a look at this. Marshall Payne. Assalamu alaikum. Marshall Payne.
Wa alaikum salam, Mufti.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah. How are you doing?
I'm good. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban. Right.
Well, I just want to say, I just want to massage your ego a little bit, subhanallah. I swear, it blows my mind how every single topic I come and find you on the straight path. Wallah, it's like
Really? Oh,
I
wow.
every time I'm like the last time we were talking about Sufism and Tasawwuf, and I've been also seeing MFG Muhammad his videos popping up, like how you said you watch one video and the algorithm starts feeding you, and it really is disheartening for me to watch all these. It's like for me it seems like it's just more division separating the ummah, and then to hear your stance on things is just subhanallah, man. I really appreciate you doing all this, really. Wallah.
Allah bless you. Honestly, Marshall, I really appreciate it, and I love the and the ego loves it as well. I'm not gonna, but I do love your kind. See, this is what I need. I need Marshall as a publicist out there.
No, you do
No, I'm
a
good.
great job on your own, bringing people to your side, and
Allah bless you.
I wanted to kind of to ask you, what do you think about how the Muslim Ummah is divided, and what can we do as individuals to, and I think maybe watching a lot of his videos maybe is pushing the algorithm more for him. But besides not watching those kind of debates and stuff like that, what are some other things that we can do to strengthen the Ummah and not divide it?
Yeah. And somebody asked who was MFG. So what is MFG? Sorry, they asked what does it stand for? Muhammad from God. It's a channel. Yeah, look, it's like I acknowledge that division, unfortunately, is a reality because people are different. People have they'll have different attitudes towards things, different perspectives, but we can't unfortunately get rid of division. Unfortunately, we can't, because it's just the way the cookie crumbles, if we like it or not. But what I would say is to try, like, let's turn the light inwards. Okay, what we can do is we have to move away, this ties into another question that people had asked me, is that, what would you advise to better ourselves as people? You see, we have to move towards a message of light, towards a message of compassion, mercy, love, a message of, like, kind of like understanding, in the sense of, like, even when we disagree, it's, all right, fine, we disagree, but there is a compassion. And one great way to do this, honestly, I feel, it's exposing yourself to videos, even like you get reels, you could be on Instagram and the algorithm will do this for you, to things of kindness and gratitude. Watching an act of kindness triggers in the brain the same kind of serotonin response and those serotonergic pathways as doing something like that, or receiving that act. Just witnessing it triggers the same, witnessing, like, I try to share on my Insta story, I try to share things that are sometimes sad, in the sense of, like, they are a reality, but, like, let's say, which remind us of gratitude, because we might see, I don't mean suffering in the sense of just sharing pictures that will traumatize us, but sharing, like, something where, that maybe, like, somebody maybe unfortunately battling with something, and we think, ya Allah, like, there was this clip, it really made me emotional. There was a child in a hospital bed and battling with something, and and it said something about we really don't understand the suffering of other people. Like we don't understand how hard, like if we think we have it hard. And like a message like that, like what it evokes in the observer, or a message of an act of kindness, like you see something kind, like I shared just today that there was this, once again, there was this a mother, quite senior lady, that somewhere that was ill in a hospital bed, but she wanted to watch her son graduate. And the university professor or whoever they were had turned up to the hospital bedside to graduate the child, the son, in front of the mother. And it's so heartwarming to watch it. And what is it doing? It's developing you. Like you're watching these things and you are, as an observer, participating. It's strange, but it's taking you through an emotional journey where you are having growth. And I think these things, and even humor, I guess we can all appreciate, but these acts of these things, that they mature us emotionally, and I think that is the antidote. It is not, we're not going to get rid of divisions, but what we can do is try to, sure, sometimes we might have dialogues and we might do things, but as long as we can go back to a place of that isn't filled with hate, then that is the solution. I feel like I don't think we're going to get rid of divisions, and I don't think Islam came necessarily to say everybody must think in one way.
Right.
So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Just seemed like watching some of those videos, it was a lot of name calling and insulting, insults to each other, and it's like we're talking about Islam, we're talking about religion, we're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're throwing names at each other. Like this is the exact opposite of what you're saying, what a dialogue was supposed to be.
Because look, I see, this is my thing, that look, and I said this, I prefaced the video as well last week by saying this, that look, we've got to understand, no matter what we think about the opinion or the ideology or the philosophy, this person or these people, this is not just to make it about Brother Muhammad or Brother, MFG. This is about any person who has dedicated a portion of their entire, like their lives, to an aspect of Islam. Like that shows the kind of genuineness about the people. It shows that these people, that they, and this is for all corners of life. I mean, sorry, all factions in society, all sects, whether, like there's been long divides, Sunni Shia divides, there's been other divides. Look, we're not going to be able to get rid of this. We're not, but what we can do is try to understand that, okay, the other person has dedicated an entire, their lives to this deen as well, in their way, even if it's a way that I don't agree with, but it's like they have done it in their way for the sake of Allah as well, and I understand that we're different and we might look at things differently in some ways, but we have a lot of commonality. And this is one thing I love about the mystics in Islam. And this is why many of the mystics were sometimes faced, they were outcasted because, you see, they call to a very universal acceptance. Like they refused to see these lines that people had drawn. And they felt that love encompasses all. And, and you have these people and you can see their names lived on, even though in their time, in the, and you see that with people like Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, Ibn Arabi, these people in their lifetimes, Maulana Rumi's teacher, Shams Tabriz, like these people in their lifetimes suffered as well from people. They weren't these, like some people may have venerated them and respected them in their lifetime. Other people, attacked them, and they did suffer at the hands of people but their names went on to become something amazing and become symbolic of love. In the Desi world, Indian subcontinent, you have this giant personality, this mystic figure of Bulle Shah. His name was Abdullah, but they call him Bulle Shah. And he was of Sayyid lineage. Shah in the Desi world is often used, it comes from the Farsi, but it's used for people who claim to be Sayyid, who claim to be from the Prophet's lineage. So he was from this lineage, and he was learned, and he was a scholar, and he was on this path of mystic. He became a mystic, and he saw in his society people had outcasted. So there were certain outcasts, people in his time, people that were that were actually, the khuntha, that I suppose like the proto-trans almost that you have. So in Arabic we call it khuntha. I suppose today it's a different discussion, because it's people kind of later changing from female to male or male to, but in that case it was from childhood. There were these people that you had, the word they use in Urdu is like khwaja sara, and they are, in Arabic you had the word khuntha, which was like they were hermaphrodites, or people in between, and a lot of societies sometimes had outcasted these people, which outcasting people is always in that way, and shunning them and treating them wrong is wrong. And Bulle Shah, he would hang around with these people. He would lead them in salah. He would pray with them. He would pray their janazas when people wouldn't pray their janazas. He was often, and for this action, he himself was outcasted, to the extent that when he died, because people said to him, "Oh, you're a Sayyid. You are a descendant from the Prophet's family. How can you hang around in these circles and have disciples that are like that?" It's a bit like people saying to Jesus that why did he have allegedly disciples, that a woman that is that isn't chaste, or they accuse some of his female disciples of being prostitutes previously and things like this. But Jesus welcomed everybody, as does the message. And when he died, in this case Bulle Shah, they refused to pray his janazah, and it was prayed by that people from that outcast community. But his name lived on and became symbolic of love. And this is my point, that this message, it does, it does reign supreme, even if it's afterwards, because you're trying to come from a place of caring. And that is what Allah, Allah says, my mercy surpasses everything, that Allah has written his compassion and mercy on everything. He loves us more than our mothers could love us. I love that, there's a sheikh, and he gave this example. He said, could you envisage any mother throwing her own baby into a fire? Could you envisage any mother? Yeah, Allah, we agree, Allah infinitely, in the hadith it says 70 times, which is the Arabs would use as almost like in infinite number, loves us more than our mothers. Then how, would you think Allah would do that with us? Like, he loves us so much. And it's this mindset as well, that we have to rewrite our script. See, I do these Patreon sessions, and I have consultees, and sometimes you're working with people and you see that they've had for so long, they've had this mindset that as if Allah, unfortunately, as if Allah's going to catch them and punish them over the littlest of, and I'm not faulting them. I'm just describing that they've had this because they've been brought up with this. That, oh my God, oh no, I'm in trouble now. Allah's, I've said this, and yeah, I better quickly. Oh no, and they live in this. It's a state of suffering, but it's not how Allah is.
In Mormonism, I was raised as a Mormon, and it's even worse than that, because they teach you that your life situation is a result of your past life in the previous life. So if you're having past life, yes, so it's like the spirit was created, and then they came to earth, And so if you're in a bad situation, if you're from a poor family, or if you're abused or something like that, it's due to who you were in the previous life, meaning you were bad, so you're getting bad now. And so that's, that can be a similar kind of mentality of God punishing you and this and that, similar to what you're saying.
Yeah. And I feel sometimes it helps, this whole thing, it helps as well. I think in some ways, maybe I don't mean this as a necessity in case anybody misunderstands this. I'm putting it as a caveat. Sometimes it helps in life to have experienced other things, even if those things were wrong. Because then a person, as you change, you have more compassion to people. Like I'll give you an example, like people who are, let's say, they are on a very religious pathway, you're very uber strict. So they don't do things, they don't do this, they don't have, they've not interacted, they've not gone out there, done all these other things that are haram, which, sure, excellent, it's a great life. But then what they do is they have this hatred for people that do that. And part of it might be, in some cases, and I'm psychologizing here, a kind of spite because they never got to experience it. It's like I heard somebody years back say, like some Dawa preacher was saying, oh, if it wasn't haram, I'd be in nightclubs right now and I'd be drinking and I'd be doing this and I'd be doing this. But, because it's haram, I don't do it. Now, so the restraint there is admirable that, the person's not doing these things because it's haram. But the ardent desire is problematic because the person has this, you could tell, like a burning desire to want to do those things. Now, it may be in such cases that, and likely that when you come across people that do them, you then hate on them even more. And you hate on, because you kind of project this, I never got this. And so sometimes having experienced things, even if those things are not, good in Islam, but having experienced them and then coming to Islam, moving away from them at a later stage, is sometimes brings a more like a realistic, compassionate understanding. That okay, it's like they're young, I get it, it's okay. Like even if you advise, okay, you shouldn't do that, but you understand. It's not like you don't behave in this very like a like almost like an oligarch or this tyrannical way with them. And I think, and that is the way, really, to, I remember, I don't believe music is haram, but I remember years ago, there was, when I had come back from the madrasa, so in my 20s, late 20s, there was a great Maulana Sheikh from Pakistan, and his name is Maulana Yunus Nomani, very popular. And he was a debater, like a passionate, ardent debater of the Deobandi school. And he would debate a lot of people. He was renowned in Pakistan as a debater, really like vicious in his, vicious ain't the right word, but really like heavyweight in the top of the league, really. And the person, whenever he would come to the UK, he would stay in part at my friend's house. So I had very good contact with him, and we developed a very good bond, and he took like a really good liking to me, which was really surprising considering that I thought, he's really down to earth, amazing, but may Allah bless his akhirah. He has passed away several years ago, and may Allah grant him an elevated maqam in Jannatul Firdaus. Ameen. But I remember this at this one time I called him to where I was staying at that point, staying in a different place, and so I called him there, and my friend was there, and so he was sitting in the front room, and I'd gone to get some drinks or something, and so we had this, at that time we had CD players, this big CD player there, and it had this music in there. So I think it accidentally came on, right? I don't know how maybe one of them were just fidgeting and it came on, and it's got like this music in it. So I come back in and it's got music on, and they're looking, my friends are like, like, oh, Maulana Sahib, and this is like a great, it's much senior to us and very like a reputable scholar. And I remember he just kind of smiled and he just said, he said, Jawan hai, he said, he's young, don't worry, like, but I remember being very surprised at his reaction because I was thinking he's going to kind of frown upon it and think, but his kind of reaction was one of almost very paternal, almost very truly kind of, fatherly like in a way that but very understanding, he said, oh, he's young, and he just kind of like smiled but that's how our attitudes should be. Yeah.
Mufti, thank you so much for all your
Very
work.
welcome.
Allah protect and preserve you.
Allah bless you. Allah bless you, Marshall. Take care, man. All right, sorry. There you go. Shukran, Marshall. Allah bless you. Likewise, our brother Akhuna Marshall, right there, joining us, right from the what have I done here? Right from the States. God, we've got. Right, let me just. Allah, Nahid Ahmad. Allah. Allah bless you, Nahid, and Allah keep you always smiling. Ameen. Right, so let me see. I do have to wrap things up. So, what time is it? Let me try to quickly get some people on. We've got Ali here. Ali, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Mufti. I'm very nervous. I've tried to reach you for a long time, actually.
Allah bless you. Where are you joining us from, Ali?
I'm from Sweden.
Sweden. Allah.
Yes.
All right.
My journey of watching you has been a lot of years. So, and
wow.
Your research have actually helped me a lot when learning about Islam.
mashallah. I
Yeah,
really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that I actually talked to you right now.
No,
I'm very nervous.
of course. No, Allah bless you. What do you do? Are you a student?
I'm a student. I'm studying civil engineering. On the side, I read Islam, whatever I can to. And
see, look, I could see the student, the cool setup and the cool vibe you've got going on there. I love it.
Yeah, now my hairstyle is horrible, so I just have to hide it. I can't.
Oh, but I love the whole setup, the hoodie, the head covering.
Well, I had to show something presentable. I couldn't go with the pajamas. It is late here.
That's epic.
Actually, there's a lot.
Talk to us. Yeah,
there's a lot. I don't know where to begin. I would like to begin with the first the discussion you had with Muhammad.
Sure. Yeah.
The first point I had to. I've watched Muhammad a lot, and I noted your point when you said that. Sorry, I'm nervous, as you can see. I need to calm down a bit.
The deep breath.
No, but what I've seen a lot in a lot of people who go to these extreme frameworks is like those who, for example, take literalist approaches, or like Muhammad take just the Quran only approach, is that imagine you have like you get born into this world and you get like 20 colored pens, but they say each approach that goes to the extreme says you can only use 2, but they have no Quranic evidence that you can only use 2. For example, the Quranist would only approach the Quran by Quran tafsir approach and linguistics. But we have, for example, the Quran itself speaking to the audience of the Ahl al-Kitab. And if you wanted to understand that, you would have to read the previous scriptures to understand what they're talking about. Because the Quran don't always assumes an audience that are already familiar with everything it's talking about. And for example, if you want to see the limits of the tools, you can see it. For example, I wrote a comment. I don't know if you read it. I saw you liked it though. It was about the point of jizya, for example. That's where you can see the limitation. For example, jizya is only mentioned once in the Quran. How would you know what it is and how much? Exactly. And even if you use only linguistics and the Quran by Quran approach, you'll see the limit. You will have to use history.
Yeah.
So Sirah, Hadith. So the
Mm.
Quranist will have to, by admission, admit that history is an important aspect to use as a tool. Now, what he will approach, he will eventually reach the point that the Salaf used, Imam Malik or the Ahl al-Bayt. They said if it went against the Quran or
Yeah.
Sunnah, established Sunnah, we
Yeah.
reject it. So
Yeah.
you will still have to get into the Ummah. And
Yeah.
also, you know, the Khawarij, and there's a famous saying from Ali where he said, where they use a verse where they say,
In
you know the
al-hukmu
verse.
illa lillah.
Yes.
In al-hukmu illa lillah.
And what does
Judgment
Ali,
is but only for God.
and what does Ali
So
say?
Sayyidina Ali, he says, kalimatu haqqin urida biha al-batil. That it
Yes.
is a word of truth being used for falsehood.
And for people
Yeah.
that don't know, I did some research because I said, okay, that's so short. But what is he saying? What does he mean by that? And you can see like the wisdom behind it. Because if you look to the Quran, you see 3-4 other verses that show that they took one verse out of context and didn't use the whole. They how do you say it? They had like the colored pens, and they said, no, we just
Yeah.
use the simple phrases. So they didn't use even the Quran by holistic reading. And I think like, as for example, as an engineer, you take all the data points, and if you want a good conclusion, you would use as much data as you want, and by that you can filter out what's good and the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. And you know, it's like, this was my point, that you see, if the Quran is giving us examples from the lives of other prophets, then just by that reasoning, the life of our prophet would equally be valuable.
Yes.
I mean, just by that logic. And you see, here's the thing. I'm going to use an example here, not to offend our Hanafi brothers, but you know, just as an example, a point that is often made against the Hanafiya and where they are criticized is that you take, for example, women praying in the mosques. Now, according to Hanafi fiqh, women aren't allowed to pray in the mosque. And often you find this criticism that is then hurled, that is said that, oh, so you take in the Western world, take any area of space, whether it's going to be clubs, marketplace, shops, shopping malls, every space women can go and they're welcome except the mosque.
Mm.
Like that, like, you see, now when you put it in that logic, it's very embarrassing.
Mm.
Because if I said, look, there's a place in this world where a woman is welcome in every area, but the only place she's not welcome is in the house of God.
Exactly.
Now that's very humiliating if we say it like that. Now, taking that logic, that if you are to say by your reason that, because surely these people, they take from history, generally speaking, like they must read about World War I, they must read about Napoleon, they must learn the wisdom from Plato, they must read about so they can take from everyone, but you just don't take from our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, how,
Exactly.
like, that's embarrassing and sad. Is that, like, you could say, you know, oh, I take from Shakespeare, I take inspiration from movie stars, I take them from Bruce Willis, I take him from, you know, this movie star Brad Pitt, I take it from Shah Rukh Khan, I take style inspiration from this person, I take lyrics from here, I take quotations from there, I take you know, Marcus Aurelius's kind of stoicism, I take the only thing I don't take is from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, astaghfirullah, like that would be so sad, like, to even say that. Like, so this, I think in that argument, it just says it all. Like, once you put it like that, that in this world, we do accept from people, we take influence from people, whether we like it or not. Yeah.
Yeah. And I noted this too also. And as I listened to the whole debate or discussion twice. So the second time I listened, I was like, okay, what did he say? What was the points? Where's the limitation? And then when he said, oh, it's not me putting the people on the back foot, it is Allah. So I was like, mashallah that you had the patience, but I was like, you just went from an extreme just to reach another extreme. What happened with the Rahman that we read in all surahs?
Yeah.
Like, what happened with that? You just see the the extreme went to another extreme. And you can see also in the Quran, when you read it, what does Allah say? That He does not like a transgressor. And constantly we are reminded that when you break a boundary, like you can live in peace with people as long as you have these boundaries that you don't cross over.
So
I
well
wanted to
said. And no, and so well said on that point that you see, and often we find, there's that Nietzschean quote from Nietzsche that beware when you fight monsters, lest you become a monster. Because most people in their battle in fighting monsters end up becoming monsters. And that unfortunately is the cyclical nature of life. And what you see, this is my point, that a lot of these people, I feel, have somewhere along the way faced hurt and trauma, and people being dogmatists, using a hadith to justify things. So their kind of journey may have began very noble, that this isn't Islam, but it ended up becoming a rival monster. Like it ended up like you became where you yourself are chucking people out, and you've become the very monster that you wanted to supplant. Like you wanted to get rid of that, and you just replaced that monster with another.
Exactly. No, but I think also while you mentioned a Western philosopher, another quote I thought about it with this point of boundaries was this quote by, I think, Machiavelli. What would you rather be, feared or loved? And he said, if I can't, I'd rather be feared than loved if I cannot have both. But if you think about it, it's really true, because some people that try to say a lot, constantly talks about hell, like a negative. But if we think about it in boundary, love doesn't care about boundaries. It just gives.
Exactly.
And between people, you need the baseline respect.
Of course, 100%.
And for that, there's a certain fear. But also, if we look at the word taqwa, it could be God fearing, but also God conscious. For example, let's say, for example, me, I'm a student. So if I think about my own expectations for an exam, I would think, I'm fearing to disappoint myself. Now imagine that for your creator. So it's the same kind of like, I have to think twice. Am I doing something wrong? Is this correct? Let's say how I treat another person. I would think twice before I actually act out in it. So that's
100%.
So that's what I think also ties to
because because human beings, you see, this is where I was speaking of systems. We operate within systems, like whether we like it or not. Now, human beings can't just operate, generally speaking, you see, because Islam is for everyone. Then the few that can excel themselves. It's a bit like, when we were teachers in schools. I used to teach in secondary schools many years ago. You see, you set the standard, the class lesson, so everybody at everybody's standard, and then you allow what was the top 10%, which was called the gifted and talented, that they could themselves develop further. So you allow the work to extend, but you set it not at their pace. You set it so everybody can get it. Now, Islam is for everyone. Now, human beings operate within parameters of sanctions, of being sanctioned. Discipline, there must be an element, and not just human beings, even primates. Like if you look at the study by Franz de Waal, like when he's one of the leading primatologists in the world, and he speaks of these weird chimpanzees or bonobos, when they live within these kind of studied reservations that they have, that they set up structures that must have discipline as well, where there is a sense of fear. So when some chimps misbehave, the rest of them castigate them, and so they are punished, because then they fall in line. Now, I'm not saying we're monkeys, but we too, that's showing that even animals like chimps, primates, who share a lot of DNA with us, have a very similar thing. This is within evolution. We human beings need a sense of, that there is a sanctioning.
But even if we look at societies, it has the same concept. It is boundaries. That's why we have laws. We have don't cross this line, because otherwise they'll create anarchy or a consequence that we have come into consensus. This is not what we want.
Yeah, so that's very well said. And so Islam does, and the Quran does highlight that. And that's why there is the mention of the damnation or the hell fire to kind of to bring people. And by the way, many people will operate from that factor.
Yeah.
I feel the ideal is to rise to the level of love.
Yes.
But
that's hard for
Islam
most people.
sets the standard
Mm.
with discipline, though. And
Yes.
as in, you do this, that's bad. And it tells you off.
Yes.
And it allows that because there will be many people who will just stay, and that's fine, because that will be enough to regulate them not to oppress other people.
Yes.
That will be enough for them to become better people. But to those who can transcend and become, embody and mirror, love and compassion, that's the ideal. But it sets it here for everyone. So I think that's very well said. And
But
shukran
also,
for
if we look in the early Sirah and we look at the society the Prophet lived in, we can see there was a harsh society. So how would you tell them off? You can't just, oh, please, can you stop it? Like, we know that doesn't work. You have to tell them with a harsh threat.
With a harsh tonality. Yeah, it is true. And that's why, and it had and has the effect that it does. But yeah, Ali,
Mufti,
mashallah.
I wanted to say two things. I'm sorry for
Sure,
interrupting a lot.
Go for it.
That's
No, go for it.
Because
no, you're not interrupting. This is how conversations flow.
Yeah, just call it the youthful passion, as she would say it. And but I did do some research recently, today actually, on the Battle of Hunayn, and I stumbled on a verse and I tried to look through. By the way, I've done I nearly forgot this. Thank God I didn't. But I have actually done a file document with all your Mufti lives with timestamps. I know you don't have it on your website, and I want to share it with you in case you want it.
Yeah, please. Are you? Reach out to me. Do you have? You have Instagram? Yeah, message me on Instagram, and and then I'll connect with you from there, and I appreciate that, man. Shukran, really.
Because I think a lot of your points, sometimes when I've stopped at a place and I thought, where do I start even the research myself? I look at your lives and then I find your conclusion, or sometimes you give the full references, sometimes you allude to it and I have to do some digging myself. But I think it's immensely helpful for people that can sometimes stuck. And there's not a lot of resources from like the Maliki school of thoughts or those who use this holistic approach, because as you mentioned, the money has pouring in from other countries and like I don't want to mention, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
So wait, let me just quickly send you the message and just say hi.
Sure.
So, okay, that's done. Now focus back. So I did the Battle of Hunayn, and it was kind of problematic, and I found nothing from what you said, but I thought maybe you can help. I did some 2-hour research on it, and it was about what happened in the battle was when they took the slave women of people took women that were already married. The hadith of that. And from my research, I have some is the hadith, so it's all sahih from all what I've seen. I looked from other scholars, different interpretation, and even the Quranic verse itself.
So go over what is it that you've come across so far, and go over the incident and refresh our memories as well.
Yes, of course. So there was a battle, and the men was still alive, from at least from you get from the reading of the hadith. So the hadith is found in Sunan Abi Dawud, and I think a few more books. And so they object to the Prophet and say these women have already they had husbands who are polytheists. And
what? Atheists?
Polytheist.
Oh, polytheist. Oh, polytheist. Okay, mushrikin.
Yeah, exactly. And then the ayah is revealed about except whom your right hand possesses. So when I read it, I was like, surely there must be a reason. Perhaps they were dead, the husbands. It would make sense then. But I couldn't come up with a conclusion that was like that soothed my heart for everything. I found
yeah.
like
So
a good explanation, but this I was like,
so
good time that you had alive today.
yeah. I mean, the specifics I'd have to look into the exact like incident and what exactly is being spoken about, but generally speaking, right? So you see this thing of concubines and how the rules of war were at that time. They were that this was not something that I suppose Islam came up with.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Mufti, if it's okay with you, I like to. Sometimes I can interrupt,
yeah,
so I
sure, of
just get
course.
to
No,
the gist
I
of it.
mind.
Let me give you more
Sure.
data just so we can
Yeah, go
skip
for
to
it,
the
go for
point.
it. Yeah, go for it.
So I
Yeah,
understand that slavery was nothing new, and if you read the Quran holistically,
exactly.
it doesn't give nowhere say go take new slaves. It says for the slaves you have, this how you treat them. So it gave better rulings that any
Yeah.
civilization
So
did.
and part of the slavery obviously had female slaves.
Yeah.
So it did, and then
And we see that it was a concept made by humans only because they didn't have wage labor. But to build societies, you had man labor.
yeah,
So slavery was
and
only
you
later
yeah,
ethically said no, it's wrong because we
and
had
what it
other
is,
systems. Yeah. Sorry.
and what in my reading, what I find is that you see the reason that there was a different kind of awareness that existed back then, a different kind of perspective on the world. So, and because our perspectives and our awareness shifted over time, so we struggle to even understand that awareness. So, and this is important. So one example is like, let's say, of slavery itself, because we have shifted on slavery. So we can't understand that why would a slave not run away? Because the slaves would never run away. And especially in the Muslim world, it wasn't like the kind of American slavery. In Muslim world, they were often educated and the slaves were then taught to do things like, yeah, you go do my business shopping for me. And they were becoming these kind of aides and these kind of, yeah.
Is okay. Just maybe you had more like insight into this. Of course, the Muslim world was expansive, like 1,000 years. So, but I know there's a famous battle of black people in Iraq doing a whole rebellion.
So the Thawratul Zanuj or the Zanj, but that's about something like 200 plus years after the Prophet. That's a few centuries later. But this right here, and that wasn't, by the way, the Thawratul Zanj wasn't just actually Zanj, although it had the Zanj in it, but it was actually in part a rise against the Abbasids. So, and the person leading it, I think, I've forgotten his name now, but he wasn't Zanj. But the whole point was that, yes, it got certain people rising, and there was this like a rebellion or an insurgency. But that's a completely different topic. Coming back,
or
no, it wasn't.
I'm not read into it.
Right. So that wasn't about slavery as a whole, but there was an insurgency against how certain treatments, certain things, and what they felt was a corruption by the governors. So it was an insurgency against that particular caliph and that particular. I think it might have been in the time of just after around Mutawakkil's time, I think, or just after that. But khair, coming back here, the awareness, what I was speaking of, the awareness is, see, this is an important point, that it's important to understand that we don't see things how they see them. So what you see, if I was taken away as a slave and then somebody says, oh yeah, hey, here's £200, go do some shopping for my house, and I'll be like, all right, okay, thanks. The moment I'm gone down the road, I'm out of here. I mean, I'm not going to come back with the goods, right? So why did these people never do this? Why did they themselves embrace so it's because there was a different perspective on the world that they had. Now, whether it was, you see, we could say whether it's good or bad or whatever, that's irrelevant, but they had a different kind of awareness of the world, and our awareness shifted. Now, the moment it shifted, we see the world entirely differently. Similarly, now this is a bit of an eye-opener to sometimes people. They had even the early Muslim culture a very different attitude towards sex. Now, our attitude towards sex has shifted, and it's been influenced by, to us, more recent history. Now, even though we feel today we are very liberal when it comes, especially in the Western world, towards sex, but it's still a different kind of liberalness, or liberation, if you like, or liberal attitude. It's a liberalness that follows a very Puritan, Victorian-esque attitude towards sexuality. This is very different towards what the Arabs had, was a very natural approach towards sex. Now, they didn't differentiate between certain. Now, to us, we can't even picture. This is why when we read some hadith, we find it very shocking, the way they speak about sex. And so we couldn't do things like that. We find it almost rude and immoral. Like, can you imagine an imam talking in the masjid about things like, it'd be considered very rude. In fact, he'd be in severe trouble, I assume. But yet the hadith speak about it in such a way that people today would find it like, they would find it almost like they would find it unsettling, because because our paradigm has shifted. So we've become very, as Muslims, and the world as well, not just Muslims, the whole world shifted later on. It became, especially under the, around the Victorian times, became very Puritan. And then some of the world sought a kind of rebellion against that. So in the early time, just as when you think of slavery, we think of labor. They didn't differentiate, like they assumed. Like today, we could think of a workforce and we think, yeah, what's wrong with that? The person's giving me labor. Now, they thought of that similarly for slavery. And now they didn't differentiate between things like sex. They saw that as a very natural thing as well. And they saw it as, well, if a man had a woman that was going to be around him. You see, this is the thing that really sometimes upsets some people when they view Islam, and sometimes it upsets certain Muslims. I actually commend how Islam had a very truly natural outlook and just took the bull by the horns when it came to matters of human sexuality. Islam didn't say things like, Islam didn't even instruct that you have to get married. But it said, oh, you know what, you can marry, because it knew people are going to do this. Islam didn't really introduce polygamy. It just knew men are polygamous. So it didn't beat around the bush. It didn't it just said, well, sure, if you're going to do it, do it. Because for the most part, men are going to always do it. Like, you see, you can't put males in a line of species. Consider almost every male species throughout nature that will have a certain tendency. They will be polygamous. They will be you're going to find almost every, especially in mammals, you're going to find every male species is like this. Human men are not going to be that different. Now, you could say, well, you're going to set rules, and this is why Islam then set some rules, but it's not going to go against the instinct. The instinct is that men are going to be polygamous. So it's going to say, well, okay, then they have rights, and, you have to fulfill responsibilities, and you have to take care, and you have to do this and that. But it's not going to address it, because men are going to almost always be like that. Now, I understand this is a problem, especially with like hardline, Western, especially modern day Western kind of outlooks demonize this and say, oh, somehow Islam has oppressed women because it's allowed men to be polygamous. But now come to this point, because it ties into this female slave historical narrative as well. You see, Islam understood that just like that, if a man had a woman that was going to be living with him that was not related to him, there's a very high chance he's going to end up having sex with her. So like why pretend it's not going to happen? So it just said, okay, fine, there's rules, responsibilities, you have a role of responsibility, you have to do this, you have to take care. She's not a wife in that sense socially, but she's like that to you. And it gave that, and to me, I feel that that was a very true to life picture that Islam just took, and it didn't kind of beat around the bush. It just said, fine, this is how it is, and just moved on. Now today, unfortunately, people see these outlooks that Islam had as almost, oh my God, this was somehow barbaric. It wasn't. It was just being very real. It was actually being very human, because people are going to do these things anyway, but then they're going to lie about them. Then they're going to pretend they don't do them, and they're going to cause more tyranny. So rather, you would have these things done with rights and responsibilities in that sense, and and that's how you'd have it. So, and in that day and age, when it comes to the female slave, they didn't differentiate between labor and sex. Now, this was, as in, what I mean by that is, today we don't demonize labor. Like the fact that I can hire you as a worker and you work from 9 to 5, we don't see that as demonic. But in the future, a generation might come that they might see that as demonic. They might think, oh my God, these people used to hire people and own their hours, and
we don't have a new system to change it.
So we don't see that as demonic, and therefore we see it as natural. But to them, they didn't see that as in that. And I don't mean Muslims, I mean humanity as a whole, generally, especially the Arabs, they had an awareness that that was quite natural. So Islam just took the bull by the horns, and it just said, fine, then there's these rights.
Yeah. But the thing is, with this hadith in particular, is that the Sahabas themselves object, because they say they are already married. That's what I have a problem, because if it was morally wrong or ethically, why did they object to it if they didn't see a problem with it?
So first of all, I'm not sure about the particular hadith, because it could be, for example, the hadith has problems in it, but it could also be.
I know
that, you. So it could be, but even let's go with the fact that, let's not, moving that aside. You see, when we say Sahaba, it could just be a person from the Sahaba. It doesn't mean that the Sahaba as a collective objected. It could just be a person came forward and said, look, is this okay? So for example, a person came forward and said about fasting, he said, look, why is it like this? How come it isn't like this? And then the Prophet said, look, but you have this is, and explained it about fasting. So similarly, it could be that a companion, let's just go with that this is authentic, and right now from the top of my head I'm not aware of the exact hadith that you're speaking of, but let's just go with it, that a companion questions that, look, we have this system, but in this case, what if the woman was already in a relationship and she was married? Now, the nature generally that they had, the rules of engagement of war in that time, where all these people were usually at war against Islam. Now, somebody has done a study of, I believe it's been a PhD or it's a thesis study of all the battles that took place with the Prophet ﷺ participating. Every single one was defensive.
Or preemptive, defensive, as you.
Yeah, sure, but defensive in the sense like when the Romans were coming down and the Prophet went to Muta. Defensive, all in that sense. The Prophet never just said, hey, there's a peaceful tribe minding their business, let's go attack them. That never happened in any battle of the Prophet ﷺ. That They were all defensive. They may have been preemptive in the sense that this tribe were getting together to attack, and the Prophet knew, and they're strategizing. So the best way is we go out to them, because if they come to Medina, we're trapped.
Yes,
They're going to lay
exactly,
siege.
exactly.
So let's us go out to them with the element of surprise.
But that's still
Now,
a defensive
that's still
strategy.
a preemptive strike, yeah.
Yeah.
But a completely offensive strike would be like, let's say you say,
We
hey,
just
you know, that tribe over there in Yemen are just minding their business. Let's land on them tomorrow and attack that tribe and enslave them. The Prophet ﷺ never did that in any, and there's been studies, academic studies on the seerah and the battle Maghazi and the seerah of the
even
Prophet.
if you read the Quran holistically, all the verses about war shows that it is only defensive, or the fact
so
of you know, the one where they went north, and that's where they
with the Romans as well.
That
were coming down.
That was the only one
but
where they took the rumor, because there was a rumor that they would be attacked.
But then the Romans didn't come though. They came and then they turned back. So the Prophet ended up, they didn't fight the Romans. But that's a fascinating battle as well, because I believe it's in that battle when they're prepping, because they're laying trenches and setting up, that the Prophet then wore a Roman thobe. So Ibn Arabi, the Maliki, says that goes to show, because the thobe was, the Roman used to wear a particular type of thobe that it was really tight on the sleeves, so you couldn't lift the thing up to reach the forearms. You couldn't lift so when the Prophet was trying to do wudu, and this is why it describes the thobe, it says because he was wearing a Roman thobe, thobun, he says jubba shamia, it couldn't, the sleeves couldn't go beyond the forearm, so he had to take his arms out from underneath to wash them for wudu. So it describes it in Tirmidhi, and Ibn Arabi says that, and that goes to show that, you know, Islam doesn't really set rules on clothing. Like wherever you are, you wear the clothing of whoever you want, it's fine. But yeah, coming back to here, so there was this understanding that, look, when a people have co-conspired against you, you are at war with them, and they would do this to you and you would do this to them, except you would have certain rules, like you can't mutate the bodies if you kill them, you can't do this, you know, if you do take captives, they have rules and they have rights and so on, and they can buy their freedom and they can do this. So just as they would have then taken the other Arab women, they would have taken the Muslim women, then there was no distinction between male and female, they would have just enslaved them. Now some companion asking this, fine, I mean, we're going with, let's say if this is authentic, then the ruling would have been the same. It would have been that, look, because that, you see, the problem with this, then it paralyzes a system, because when you have a system, because if we go into each person, because each person is going to have a story then, because if I say, well, look, okay, but wait a minute, let's go into each person's story. Like, let's say, okay, wait a minute, like, let's say we've got 100 captives, and so you and me, Ali, and we say, okay, now let's go through each person's story. Let's go through this person. What's your name? His name is Abdul Shams. So, okay, he says, oh, you know, my story is when I was 10 years old, you know, I've been suffering from trauma all my life, and I've been doing this. And we said, guys, you know what? Damn, okay, let this one go. We said, what's your story? He says, you know, I was orphaned as a child, and, you know, this happened to me. Say, oh, damn. This guy's story. Okay, let this guy go. Okay, what's her story? She says, oh, you know, I've got a husband. And so we say, all right, okay, let this one go. I say, oh, but the problem is they don't extend that to, you see, then the system can't work. And the problem is the system is one of war. It's not one of sitting down and dialogue, because they're refusing to have dialogue. They're prepared to decimate these tribes, and they would even mutate the bodies and do all. So if you take in that, you see, this is the thing, you know, like when Sayyidina Umar anhu said, when he said that the saying that you know, la yufallu al-hadid illa bil hadid, that, you know, it is iron that tends to iron, that, you know, straightens iron, that there is a time where you have to, unfortunately, in the war scenario, that's what it is. And this is why Islam gave many opportunities to say, never try to escalate to war. And Muslims are a people, the Prophet said, that we do not desire war. La tatamannaw, do not desire war. Do not desire the battlefield. But if you find yourself in it, then the Prophet said, stay steadfast. That, do not like hold your ground. But we don't desire it. The Prophet, on each term, whenever he had an opportunity, he would say that, look, even when he came into Mecca and he had the opportunity, he could have kind of done all of this and taken revenge. He didn't. So this, I can see in isolation, these things can come off as, somebody could say, oh, like a companion asked this, oh, isn't this a bit? But in perspective, you can see that, well, that's what, those are the rules by which the other tribes would then back off. Because people were, you take the Ghazwatul Khandaq, for example, they amassed a coalition and they vowed to decimate and they vowed to slaughter man, woman, and child that lived in Medina. And if it wasn't, and because of Medina being surrounded partially by mountains, and then Salman al-Farsi radhiyallahu anhu gave the suggestion of digging the trenches, and they still laid siege. And let's be honest, that it was very, like a traumatic time for the Muslims. They were very kind of like, it was very scary for them because they stayed there for a while. Then if it wasn't for the storm that came, and the Prophet did say, he said, you know what, do a treaty with some of Ghatfan, like, because he knew that these guys could be swayed. And then Ghatfan left them. But the point is that, or some of them left, but the sandstorm is what kind of broke their willpower, and they eventually left. But had they got through, that would have been the end of man, woman, and child in Medina. It would have been the end of Islam. It would have been the end of everything. So yes, it was a very harsh society. And yes, Islam was set up in a way, and this is what the Maliki Madhab teaches, the school of Medina, that it sets an arc, that when humanity and civilization reaches that arc, their rulings change. So, and we call this Masalih Mursala, we call it Maqasid. In English, trajectory hermeneutics. Yes, slavery would be haram today. Yes, these kind of taking female slaves would be haram today. And Islam would have wanted that as the society would have changed, which it has changed. But in their time, it was a very harsh society. And that was the perspective by which they all abided. So it was a very warrior society, and they all abide, and they had a different perspective. So that's, that's how we kind of understand these things.
Yeah, thank you. I like the point you said. If it like, I needed that one data point to make sense of it. And when you mentioned the harsh environment, because
it was because you can't. You see, like if I say to look, like let me,
No, if you allow me, just
to
share like how I did the research. I know your usual method is to look at the Quran, look at the Sunnah, look at what the scholars have said, look at the reasons, try to interpret the matan and the isnad. I did all that, but I felt like something is surely missing, and I was like, I need a Mufti. Here's like, I can't go further than this. I need somebody who has read something to explain this, because it didn't make sense.
You pinned it. When you mentioned, did you mention? Sorry, it was, what was it saying before? Mentioned the Machiavellian. Machiavelli. Did you mention Machiavelli as well?
Yeah, I mentioned Machiavelli.
You did, yeah. You did mention Machiavelli, yeah. You see, even though this is not our default position that we aspire to be Machiavellian, but it is undeniable that being in certain aspects of life Machiavellian is necessary for survival.
Exactly. It's functional.
We can't look, let's not pretend like, look, Islam is about love, but it must mention the disciplining as well. It must mention the sanctions. This is why it does mention hell, because if you just promoted a very hippie-esque, kumbaya, we're all love,
like the first point, the boundaries. You need to have the base.
Because look, this would be beautiful. Islam would have promoted this, it would have promoted this culture of kumbaya, we're all brothers and sisters in humanity, let's hold hands. Problem is, the other people would have just cut your hands off and stabbed you. They would not have, you see, you would have been nothing but decimated. So this is when this thing, the Prophet saying, look, do not desire battle, do not do tamanni, this kind of, I long for, I want. Like today we get some people do, and not just today, in the past as well, you have some people with this bravado of like, we just want war, we want death, we want sword swinging. This was not the way of the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ was rahmatan lil alameen, and he never ever gave that kind of thing of like, we should, let's corner this person and kill him. And that was against his, in fact, in the famous thing when the person came and he was very disrespectful, and some of the companions said, Ya Rasulullah, why didn't you give me the signal and I would have struck him with the sword? And the Prophet said, come on. He said it is not, that the Nabi does not do kha'inatul a'yun. We don't do this kind of like, hey, get him. We don't do that. Like what you see is what you get. And so this whole thing that you need, war by its nature is that attitude is very harsh, and it needs in that moment firmness. In that moment, softness is naivety. It's silly behavior. You see, you need in that state. There's I was going to say that, and Imam Malik said this as well, by the way. In his time, there was the uprising of Muhammad Nafsakiya. May Allah raise his maqam in Jannah, Amin. When he was he had an uprising against the Abbasids. Imam Malik, what I've read was, from his heart maybe in agreement, but he was advising him, don't do this. And the reason that I've read, or one of the reasons that's suggested that Imam Malik said, he said that you are a virtuous, pious man. Like you're a man of God. These people you're talking about engage in different rules. Like they will be not only vicious, they will be treacherous. You're not prepared to meet them on that ground with treachery. So you will by default lose. Because when a person is prepared to be treacherous, when a person is prepared to break all the rules, and you're playing by the rules, it doesn't work. There's a Bollywood movie that has a scene that captures this so well. There's a scene where this bandit comes into town, and he's like, when they come in, they kidnap the women and they loot the village. And he comes in and he's like, I got all these bandits. So this one man comes out and he stands up and he says, you know what? He says, if you're a true man, fight me one-on-one. So the bandit goes, "Wah? Kya baat hai?" Wah. He says, okay. He says, come on then. And this guy's like a brave, strong man, like brave in the sense like he's prepared to stand up for his right. So when he comes to the bandit, the leader, the bandit says to him, he says, but I thought you said one-on-one, so what's he doing with you? And the guy says, who? So as he turns around, he stabs him with his knife. And so as he falls down, he says to him, he says, Yar, he says, you know what? He says, you brought courage, and you brought this jigger, this kaleja, this liver. You brought this courage to the fight. But he says, Magar kamina pan kahan se laoge? But where will you bring the rascality from? You see, where are you going to bring the treachery? You can bring courage, but to win fights, you need to be vicious and ruthless. And you're too principled. Now, that's not to say, obviously, I'm just quoting a Bollywood. That's not to say people weren't principled. They were, but they were firm in the rulings. And if you start dismantling this thing of
things are practical, you need to be practical.
Yeah.
You can't just sit and wait for that's many people today who try to do good say, what should I do? What should I do? But many, I feel, that are good-hearted, they are not practical in this sense, so they never move forward. Like for example, a classical question is, why are the most rich people evil in a sense, because they are willing to go that practical step that you are not willing to take. So, for example, they say, I don't deserve it. Why? Because if you are good, you should actually do the practical step and do the good with it. You see, I'm not saying do wrong. I'm just saying.
But I agree with
for
you, and I
example,
think it's very.
an evil person would, for example, they wouldn't mind, for example, bothering people a little bit too much, like call 3 times instead of 1, to say, you know what, let me just try more so I get this opportunity.
Well, not even evil. I would rephrase that: a person that is just being, they're just being more, less. We'll say they've kind of dampened down. They're being more pragmatic and
Yeah,
in
exactly.
pursuit of
I
an
just use
object.
evil good
Yeah.
just because for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Just for how most people think, they start to think evil good, but it's more really
Yeah.
practical. And you see that
And
in
this-
Nietzsche describing like how morality is like more of
And
a
this
tool.
is not to say, and you totally, I'm sure you agree with me. And just to caveat this is not to say in any way that those rulings, I don't believe those rulings to be evil. I don't believe the
No.
response to be anything like that. What I'm saying, and what we're saying here, is that taking an itemized approach of, let's say, pure compassion, an itemized approach, doesn't work in a harsh environment where you have to rule by where there's generalization, and the rules are one of generalization. So that's the rules that everybody is engaging with. So you have to engage in those rules, but you set rules of compassion within. So you say, okay, so when they took them as captives, the captives have these human rights, they have these dignities, you cannot violate their dignities, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. And that's what they, but the sexual element was because the whole society didn't see that as something they differentiated from the labor of the slave. They didn't see it as differentiated. And Islam just took a very pragmatic approach on that. It didn't see it as one of, like today, I suppose people are seeing it as a fetish, but it didn't see it like that. It didn't fetishize the concept of like, oh, this is like sex slavery. It saw it as this was just captives.
Natural.
And it just saw it as very natural. And people are going to do this regardless. So rather than a culture of where people are just lying and hiding and being tyrannical, that you have a system that kind of governs people. And that's what the approach it took.
Sure. I just smiled a little bit just because you're in the middle of your explanation. I just this interview of Shah Rukh Khan is where he says, first get money and then think about being a philosopher.
Then become a philosopher. I've watched that interview. It's actually very it's on point.
So I can remind it.
Very good point.
Because get the base needs, and then it's like I don't remember this model, but we first have the human needs.
Yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Maslow's, and then you start to think about the higher ethics of things. But you cannot do that unless you establish first the ground pillar. That's what people always forget in these discussions. Also, I think.
Ali, shukran for coming on. It's been beautiful that you raised these topics, and we've had a really good, and I think for people as well, it's been very beneficial. So shukran once again. Do reach out to me on Instagram, and we're going to stay connected, inshallah.
Yes, inshallah.
Right. Take very good care of yourself. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
People, that was Ali from Sweden. Vah, a beautiful soul from a beautiful country with beautiful landscape. Vah. So people, right, we've got to really sign off. Oh my God, is that the time? Okay, just to say salam, I've got here Sayyid Mahar. Assalamu alaikum.
Sayyid Mahar. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May Allah keep you in His peace in this world and in the next world, brother. Yeah, alhamdulillah. There are very few people born like you in this ummah, man. If there are more people like you, I am telling you, we would be not in this situation which we are in.
Yeah, Allah.
Today, all over the world, how many Muslim countries have been destroyed? We have good alims, no doubt about it. They're Dr. Israr Ahmad, Dr. Zakir Nayak, they're good alim, alhamdulillah. Okay, but I believe I'm researching for like last 35 years on this topic which you speak about. Okay, I am an engineer from India, but I reside in Texas, in America, and I do very very deep research on this, and I'm really, really very hurt about the situation we are in today. 10, 15 countries are gone. Okay, I don't have to name it. You know it very well. Like what is the situation in Yemen, Syria, Palestine,
Mm,
Gaza, or even Kashmir, India. Even
mm,
Pakistan
mm.
is also not,
Of
like
course,
a
yeah,
failed state only, right?
of course,
Why?
yeah.
Why? This is the same community in the 300 years who captured almost one third of the world at that time. This is the same community, this is the same religion which has influenced the minds so much that the people who were primarily agronomy, or agronomy based, they were scientists. Ibn Sina,
Mm,
Ibn Battuta,
of
Ibn,
course.
you see that what kind of
Mhm.
impact this philosophy which Allah revealed, the doctrine, what kind of impact this doctrine had, that the people who were not even like businessmen, they were like agrarian economy, they were like and they were leaders, of the world, and they had first university, Qarawin University, Al Azhar University, in Baghdad, the Darul Hikmah, and we were the
Mm,
leaders of the science. And today, even when Allah Ta'ala very clearly says in Surah Anfal that وَإِدُّ لَهُمْ مَا أُسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ وَمِن رِبَاطِ al khayli
crazy.
turhabun bihi, that prepare against them what you believers can of militarily power and cavalry to deter Allah's enemy and your enemies as well as other enemies unknown to you but only known to Allah. Allah is very clearly saying, but uh, who is prepared? 57 countries, 57, only
Mm,
one Iran can come and reply to aggression. No other
yeah,
country has the. How come we missed these many great points? How come
yeah,
the shift is so drastic that the community who was ruling the world is like, I'm sorry to say that we are like beggars now. We want
yeah.
financial aid from each and every country. So
Mm,
my question is this, that I go with Quran eccentric. Like I'm not
of
like
course.
Hadith disbeliever, but I go like when the Quran is there. See, when Allah Ta'ala
Of
preserved
course.
the previous books, the Bible and the
Yeah,
and the Injil, when Allah did not preserve it, it changed. So Allah
of
preserved
course.
the Quran. Allah preserved the
Sure.
Quran. So what is the point if you bring another book and keep it besides the Quran?
Sure.
Then the whole system is not preserved if that another book is not as preserved as the Quran.
Sure. I agree. Yeah.
Right, like if you have a
Yeah.
very solid house of made up of iron, but if it has a
Mm,
window which is like made up of like weak, then the thief will enter from that window. It doesn't
mm.
matter how strong. So if the Quran is
I agree with
protected
you.
in such a manner, then what is the point of bringing another books and keeping it at par with the
I,
Quran, which is not
I
as
agree.
preserved as the Quran?
The
Right. So this
Quran should always be the
center.
sun
Yeah.
in this entire. It is the source of light. Anything else only reflects the light. It doesn't introduce light of its own. So that the Quran is. We should all, I feel, as Muslims, be Quran centric. The Quran. It's not even the Quran first. It's Quran centric. Like that is. We always, everything is. The Quran, everything succumbs to the Quran. It's as simple as that. So whether it's going to be hadith, sunnah, whatever, and if things clash with the Quran, then those things are inadmissible. Yeah, sorry, your mic's gone off, by the way, so I can't hear you.
Can you hear me or no?
No, very low. If you put that back on, let's see,
Oh, okay, okay, all right.
because your mic's gone off all of a sudden.
Yeah, you can hear me now, right?
It's still very low, so I don't know why it went low. It wasn't low before when you were talking. Right there. Now it's just muted, but let me can you unmute it? Yeah, it's unmuted, but let's see.
Let me see if
Yeah,
you can.
that's better. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, I can hear you.
So this is the thing. So my question and concern is this, and we can discuss upon this later on as well in details, because my plan is to, move back from USA. I'm already like up onto a retirement age now. I'm 55, and I was working as an IT engineer here, and then work in the field like. I want to educate thousands of students, and in India madrasa system, you see that, very well that what is the madrasa system in India, what is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
I don't have to explain you anything. I have seen so many videos of you, and you are very much well aware of what's going on. It's very surprising that a person like you coming out of a madrasa system, and then you have a mind which you did not, you know, your mind did not become captive. Your mind still remained free. That's strange, because the first thing in the madrasa system is that they brainwash the mind. You know, if you
It
you
is unfortunately.
you are out of Islam. That's what they say. You know that, you know, if you, he says, they say, you do you know more than Bukhari? They say, you know, you are challenging a hadith from Bukhari. You know, so basically, point is this, that see, so the Muslims were very good. They're following. I mean, in the beginning, 300 years, they were doing really good. I mean, there were so many
Yeah.
schools of thought, as Allama Iqbal writes in the Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, that in earlier period there were like 700 schools of thought. So that's a good thing that ijtihad was
Yeah.
going on, and you know, they were trying to extract from whatever knowledge was available the Sunnah. You know, definitely, because the Quran laid down the principles, the doctrine, the theology, everything, and then the Sunnah explains implementation details on how to follow it. And then if there are some differences in the Sunnah, that's fine. I mean, you keep your hands you know, on the side, like Sadal, what you explained in one of your videos, or if you fold it, that is not of great concern. That is not of great concern. So that Sunnah coming, that kind of things is fine, because it doesn't change the doctrine. The problem comes when the doctrine is changed, like, you know,
Yeah.
somebody giving three talaq. That the thing is, when the Muslims were doing so well in the first 300 years, just going with the Quran and the Fiqh
Yeah.
Sunnah, 700 schools of thought. Why the Muslim accepted this, that Bukhari, I don't know whether he was a scholar or not. He was a muhaddisin, but I don't know if he was a like a mufti or a scholar or what. Bukhari Muslim coming from Muslim, I don't know where he's from, but Bukhari coming from Samarkand or Bukhara, and then collecting the sayings from public, and then making it in a book, and then that book is taking the seat next to the Quran, and sometimes, as you also said in your lectures, sometime above the Quran. You know, in how this happened. I mean, how they allowed it.
Because, you know, this, you see, the core problem with all of this is the issue of dogma. To start off with, dogma, Islam did not come to teach dogma in that way. It came, you see, the problem is that the Quran and Islam and the Sunnah taught Iman. We got bogged down with Aqidah. These are two different things slightly. I mean, I know Aqidah is about Iman, but Aqidah becomes a dogmatized members club, which, you know, we've got to see, is your membership up to scratch? It's interesting, the Prophet never taught Aqidah in that way. Like, at most, you see, the Prophet said, why didn't the Prophet, not just the Prophet, the Salaf, the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Atba'u Tabi'een, even Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa, right? They never taught the list of what you must believe in. Like, think about that. That's phenomenal, isn't it? Like, why would they not teach? At most, you have this one simple hadith, which we take as the bedrock, that where the Prophet is saying that amantu billahi wa malaikati wa kutubihi wa rusuli wal yawmil akhir, you know, and wal ba'thi ba'd al maut, you know, that I believe in Allah, I believe in revelation, I believe in prophets, you know, that, and I believe in life after death, essentially. Like, these very simple things are the bedrock of Iman. Now, Aqidah is a different thing altogether. You know, here's a checklist of, you know, I don't know, let's say Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi's 164 points or 100 or whatever it is, and then people have got more after him, and now we've got to measure you against this, and if you miss on one, chuck him out. See, this dogmatism is about control. There's, you know, there's, in psychology, you have this thing, discourse analysis, and it's in social sciences as well, and, you know, Foucauldian, where you look at power structures, and power structures are not, they're in institutions, they're in language, they're in discourses. Now, this discourse of how we determine orthodoxy, what is orthodoxy? I mean, the dialogue of orthodoxy really emerges probably about 200 years after the Prophet, and emerges around the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and the creation of the fitna of the fitna of the creation of the Quran. Now, this thing. So once you've got this, now you move on a few centuries, and then you get the canonization of these hadith books. It is several centuries after the Prophet, several centuries. I would say it probably starts about, you can probably see some roots forming around 400 years after, some tiny roots. Then it starts growing 500 years after the Prophet. 600 years after the Prophet, it's now taking some stronghold. 700 years after the Prophet, it's solidified. You know, this thing, like by the time of the likes of Ibn Salah and then definitely Ibn Hajar, this thing, the canonization of Sahihain and Bukhari has solidified. This was the Shafi'i outlook. Then what's happened is, for some reason, and this would make a great PhD, that the other schools, which were the dominant schools, the Maliki and the Hanafi, are really the majority of the Muslims worldwide. And they were the only two schools that were imperial, in the sense that they had, dynasties ruled by them. So the only two ruling schools, madhabs, was the Hanafi in the east and the Malikis in the west. This was it. And this is why Ibn Hazm obviously has a problem with them as well. He says that they, political, because they were the two schools that ruled. Now, for some reason, by about the 700s onwards, and this would make a study why, I don't, I'm sure there's many answers, but these schools also they kind of start losing that cultural war against the Shafi'is. And this thing of hadith, إذا صح الحديث, is the hadith is correct, and that is my madhab. The canonization of hadith books over the concept of sunnah starts to kind of prevail. And so what happens is, what I believe, I like the term used by Sherman Jackson, Dr. Sherman Jackson, the crypto-Shafi'ization takes place. So the other madhabs, even though they're still Hanafi, like you could take, for example, the Deoband school, it's still very strictly Hanafi. You could take the Malikis even later on, and this isn't going to be all Deobandis, and it isn't going to be all Malikis, but it started to prevail. And I think more so in the Hanafis than it did in the Maliki. It did as well prevail, but you still had mixed voices. You got this crypto-Shafi'ization where they, at face value, are Hanafi, but in practice, their modus operandi is exactly as if they're Shafi'i. Like everything is about the hadith. The hadith. It's no longer about, it's all about justifying everything through the hadith. So today you will get, for example, Hanafiya being almost hadith textualists and hadith literalists and defending every hadith in Bukhari, whereas the whole madhab is built on going, opposing rulings that were in Sahih Bukhari. In fact, Imam Bukhari, in his, today Sheikh Atabek was supposed to come on, but I think he was held up. I know he's spoken about this publicly as well, that you see, Sahih Bukhari, one of the key objections against Sahih Bukhari is his derision and belittling of Imam Abu Hanifa that people held against him. Now, okay, it's a debate, but in his Bukhari, in several points, he says, and some people have said. But, in Arabic, this kind of comes off a bit belittling. It's like, it's like saying, and someone has said. It's like that. It's got a tone to it, which is a bit belittling. And he says, قَالَ بَعْضُ النَّاسِ. Whereas when he's speaking of other Imams, he uses their names. But when it comes to Imam Abu Hanifa, he says, وَقَالَ بَعْضُ النَّاسِ. And someone decided to say this. So he doesn't even use his name. And so this is a big deal, that a lot of Hanafis were really offended by this. That how dare, and they had replies to it. And even when we studied Bukhari in the madrasa, they had to respond to this. قال بعض الناس. And we took several lessons dedicated in replying to وقال بعض الناس, and someone decided to say. And why was he targeting Imam Abu Hanifa? And in some of these قال بعض الناس, he's actually harsh. In some he isn't. He just says, and someone said this. But in some he says, and he went against the sunnah of the Prophet, and he went against the Kitabullah. He's quite harsh in some of the قال بعض الناس. But today, you have the Hanafiya being some of them, not all. Like you have, they are, especially, I suppose, the other persuasions, like you have the Brelvis, they're much more relaxed. They're not that. But you might get, for example, can you have your shalwar or your trousers below the ankles? Now, this is seen as a literal thing amongst modern day Hanafis, like modern day many modern day Deobandis see this, treat this like a sin.
Yes.
Whereas really, even the classical Imam Nawawi, Ibn Abdul Bar, and all these legendary ulama of the past said, no, this hadith was only speaking about those people who did it as a practice, min khuyala, min babi khuyala. They did it from this arrogant practice, and people don't do it like that. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh himself would often have it below. And, the Prophet, when he said to the Prophet, oh, Ya Rasulullah, what about me? Because it would often be below. And he said, Lasta minhum. You're not from the people I'm talking about. Now, but today, this school, which was the voice of reason in Imam Abu Hanifa's time, championed reason, that that went to the extent that said, oh, Persians who've embraced Islam don't know Arabic, can even do their salah in Persian. I mean, to that extent, and I'm not saying that we have to agree, but look at the compassion Imam Abu Hanifa was bringing. He was trying to inclusively welcome people into Islam. His madhab had kind of become the kind of Frankenstein of what he stood for, because he stood for this whole inclusivity. And you've got this, they've become kind of, in the words of Dr. Sherman Jackson, crypto-Shafi'ized. In that way, they've just become Shafi'is who are wearing the guise of Hanafis, and they just say no everything. And in fact, ironically, even Shafi'is are more lenient than them in many rulings. So they've become like a hardline Puritan Shafi'ization. So almost a bit Salafi, but without being Salafi. And so I agree with you that any person, any hadith that comes, that compromises the honor of the Prophet, that goes against verses of the Quran. The Quran teaches us there's no compulsion in matters in the faith. La ikrah fi din. To take a hadith by somebody that was a Khawarij, Ikrama, who would have had problems with Sayyidina Ali, right? Because the Khawarij were opposed to Ali, some of them calling him a kafir, and some maybe not a kafir, but they passionately disagreed with him and belittled him. Taking hadith from Ikrama, who is a Khawarij, narrating it from Sayyidina Ali, really, I mean, from all people, Ikrama is going to narrate from Sayyidina Ali, saying that Sayyidina Ali said, kill the apostate. Like, this alarm bell should be ringing. And how is this? Come on, this cannot be. Like, that's like somebody who does not like another person is narrating from him a ruling that goes at face value against the Quran and happens to support the Khawarij tendency of killing people that have apostated. That's like, that's very convenient, isn't it? That's like an addicted gambler saying, oh, I just found a hadith that said actually gambling is fine. That's very convenient, isn't it, that you found it? So this is what I mean, that when these rulings come, we have to remember that the light of the Quran is the light.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
that was a good explanation, and you gave some good insights on that. Thank you so much. I have another part of this question is, now this issue, we understand that this is the issue. Now talk about the solution. Like, is there a solution possible? Like, I mean, to like, whoever is trying to do the ijtihad, like, I mean, Ibn Taymiyyah, or maybe like Dr. Fazlur Rahman Ansari from Aligarh Muslim University, or Allama Iqbal, or Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, whoever has come out and spoke against this injustice and say that, no, the Quran take the precedence, and you don't treat, you don't go by hadiths like this is wrong, then he's outcasted from the
Yeah.
community. Maulana Fazlur Rahman Ansari has to go out to America
Right.
in the last days. Chicago, he was in Chicago, and even people call names to Allama Iqbal. The last thing is there any solution to it? Like, what is the solution? We should, there should be ijtihad, there should be new school of thought with all those hadiths
Yeah.
dropped off which are problematic.
So, when we look at the problematized hadith, they aren't that many compared to,
Yes,
this
that
was
is
my
correct.
point.
That is
They
correct.
aren't that many. Like,
No,
so
but they are very, very,
problematic.
very, but they have a big impact. They are only
Yeah.
5%, but they are very
Yeah,
big
but
impact.
so I would feel that, look, what we do is we champion the voice of reason. We champion always the voice of compassion. Our perspective should always come from compassion and empathy, and mercy, because compassion and empathy is mercy, and that's really the message of Islam. Now, as to ijtihad, I feel we should always welcome ijtihad. We should always welcome, because look, sometimes you don't know what opinion you may have some. It may carry certain gems for other people. You just don't know. So we should welcome. We don't have to always agree. Look, people will always come up with thoughts, with opinions. You might have an opinion. I'll have
Yes.
opinions. People could, they're more than welcome to dismiss all of my opinions.
Yep.
That's the very nature of discussion, discourse, and dialogue. That people, they have their say, and you take what's good. Allah says those who have faith, that when they what's the verse? الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. Those who listen to the discourse and follow that which is good out of it. So which is the best of it. Sorry. So we shouldn't be insecure about any time we hear a new opinion, we try to shut it down, or opinions in the past, because let's face it, most of the opinions have already existed. They're in the past. Very few things are going to be new now. But we don't need to shut them down just because we can explore them, we can critique them, we can disagree with them, we can decry them, disavow them. We can even say, look, I think that's absurd. I think that's silly, but we shouldn't have a hatred.
Yes.
That's the point. So the difference is the energy. Like we could say, it's like somebody said earlier on, look, what would you say these Quranists that were reading like this? I said, look, at the end of the day, you have to, whatever even our criticality must be from a place of compassion, not from a place of just trying to knock people down.
Yep.
So because then you're just doing what other people are doing. There's no difference. And I think that is the only thing we can do,
Sure.
Hazrat. Yeah, I feel that's
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it very much, brother.
Most welcome.
May Allah
Sayyid,
reward you for
take
that.
care of yourself, and I will
Thank you.
inshallah follow up on that. So
Yes,
take
I do.
care.
Thank
inshallah.
you.
You're
Assalamu
welcome.
alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. People, that was Mahar Hazrat, I would say Sayyid Mahar from the US. Thierno, I bring you on. I've got to say, you waited ever so patiently. I'm sorry for the wait, man.
Oh.
Right, what's happened to my screen? Right, yeah, Allahu Akbar.
No, I was no problem. I was working while listening to you. I was kind of
right.
focused on this, but no problem. Maybe next time. I think
Sure.
that it is maybe late for you. And
Yeah, it has got quite late. And by the way, I just wanted to say, because I would have loved to have also got your thoughts. I know you also, if I recall correctly, you pertain to the Quranist movement. But I have felt that your approach, I know I had a dialogue with Brother MFG, but I know I felt because you've come on a couple of live streams, that your approach has been different. I felt, it's not been necessarily, even though it is Quranist, but some of the attitudes were, I feel, different. Maybe, I'm just placing how I felt.
Yeah. I discussed with Brother MFG, and Brother MFG is he's very kind. But the thing is, I don't want to take up much of time. I will just tell you something about MFG.
Yeah, of course, please.
He's a type of guy that he is very cautious because his life is maybe at stake. You know, people
Yeah.
every time that he engaged in Quran alone debate, sometimes people threaten his life,
Yeah.
maybe at gunpoint. Sometimes and you know it. Like I think like you have a discussion with him, and he didn't even want to reveal his information, his localization,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
sometimes
that's true.
people are okay. So when he's engaging with people, like he's very
Yeah.
cautious. He's very like okay, preparing for fighting, and I know that maybe it is maybe in some of the live streams. It's like okay, I'm gonna go. It is like special debates, or he's like debating every time. But
Yeah.
I think like when you go to know him and to understand him, you see that he's somebody who's like have a heart and a very deep love for the religion. And
Oh,
yeah,
mashallah.
I would this yeah. So yeah, I will wait some maybe another time. Maybe
No,
you're tired. I
no,
will
no,
I
no.
will
But I appreciate you saying that because look, because you are of the Quranist community
yeah
as
yeah.
well and the Quranist kind of persuasion, so it's it's meaningful coming from you because it's
Yeah
easier
yeah.
to speak to other people who are
Mhm,
not of the persuasion. Now,
mhm,
and I have felt this as well. I have felt that look, most, if not, I would feel all, if not all, most
mhm.
people that are coming from this Quranist perspective, they're coming because they care about the deen.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about them, it's about all people that have devoted themselves to some area of Islam.
Mhm,
They all care deeply about the deen. Otherwise they wouldn't, otherwise they'd be indifferent to it. You know, they wouldn't care less. They'd just be like, whatever. But you can see it consumes their life, it consumes their time, their energy, and that, if anything, must be deeply valued, that this
mhm,
person has this deep sentiment for the faith. Now obviously we then could disagree, we could disagree with perspectives, with energy. I do feel that when it comes to a lot of Quranists, and once again, and I haven't felt that with you, by the way, Thierno. I know I've had you on a few. I felt from your very calm energy. So,
No, no,
uh,
no. Yes,
but
Quranists, Muslim, Christians,
yeah,
everybody is human, and everybody has their own
yeah,
personality,
and
and everybody has
exactly.
their own ways
But I,
to discuss or
yeah,
to
100%. And I
discuss
felt
the topic.
sometimes from a lot of Quranists that they are on edge, and there is a almost like unresolved anger that they're carrying, which may be
Mm,
justified in the sense that they have had a lot of trauma with people. And like, let's say now you could take Brother MFG as an example. He, because he's been, everybody, he's been debating and they just shouting. Now that's all he's used to now.
mhm,
So because he's used to it, by default, he's ready. He's on it, like because it's so like the nervous system is expecting it. So it's not expecting just a regular conversation because because everywhere else he gets attacked. So he's expecting that. Now, yeah. So I understand that as well, and I do. I pray may Allah keep him safe, and
yeah.
if I could give any thoughts, of a nasiha.
Mhm,
And maybe it means nothing because what does my nasiha mean to, and especially to, but if I could say something, look, and maybe Brother MFG hears it, or maybe other people like him hear it. I want to say that, look, in some ways I can relate. I say this from some experience, yeah, that because I feel historically like I too had some of this stuff as well. And only in hindsight you can compare, because you feel that, like I can actually see now some of that. I did have some of that as well. And I can see. So my thoughts, nasiha, and I suppose, nasiha is lil Muslimin, it's for all of us, that unfortunately that energy, what it does, you see, because it's unsettled, it's kind of has a it has a turbulence to it. It only, like, I won't say only, but it often produces a turbulence. Like, because nature produces, it mirrors. So we need to kind of find a stillness, a kind of calmness. And that will be done by, these things of empathy, these things of trying to come to this understand. Like, even if, for example, you don't accept the Muslim tradition, the Islamic tradition, think, okay, fine. I get it. You're coming from this place. I get it. But sure, I see it differently. As opposed to a kind of like, oh, this is ha ha ha, mocking. And look, don't get me wrong. I've done things like this myself in the past.
Yeah, you got
So
you got your fair share of
yeah, and I got my fair share of hatred.
Turbulence.
Yeah, I got my fair share of turbulence, and
Yeah.
and when you're in the midst of it, like I had like very thick skin, like I'd have so much hate online, I wouldn't care, right? And when you're in the thick of it, the momentum carries you. But when you do find a stillness later on and a peace, only then you can compare the peace to turbulence. And then you think, bloody hell, like that's actually, not only is it unhealthy, it's not positive. Like that's, but you only realize it when you come to a stillness. Because when you're in it, you don't realize it, because that's what you know and you're fine with it. But it's when you see later on, like I see that unfortunately, it might do, like, sure, look, don't get me wrong, you can still do things which are good. Like, I'm sure he's still, like, Br MFG is still a source of inspiration for many people out there, and he's helping them. But believe me, that help would be so much more amplified if it started coming from a kind of stillness. Like, if it came from a place that wasn't so riddled with negativity, it would, like, believe me, like, even then, look, don't get me wrong, the other people still won't agree with his views, that are not going to agree, but they will have less hatred in turn. Like, some of them might still have hatred, but let them be. That's on them. That's not your responsibility. You speak qulu linnasi husna. Like, smile, and the world will smile back at you. And there will be some people that will still be miserable. That's fine. You're not here to mirror that energy. Right. So that's, if anything, these are my thoughts.
No, it's very so if you want to really know exactly how is really like his normal self, like not is I don't know, somebody like something like you have to maybe come and listen to one of his Friday sermon. Like every Friday, it does it do a live stream, and he's like a Friday sermon. It talks about God, talks about love, compassion, helping people. About this all this conflict about in Palestine and Gaza. He really did help first-hand people. He was committed to help his people in Syria. He goes over there and he did a lot of work to help people.
May Allah make things easy for
giving love to people.
People of Syria.
Yeah.
Is he Syrian, by the way?
I don't know. I don't want to comment on that.
Okay, sure. No, we have another bond then, you see, because I studied in Syria as well years ago. There you go. Another.
When I see him, when I see him, I'm saying that okay, I'm seeing maybe you, but with a lot more, I don't know, tough skin. Like you got his his armor. But I think it's good. I really hope that MindTrap would have been like maybe the one with Edith Yüksel, the one with Edip said,
Yeah,
it was like
Edip.
it was like very much engaging. Like it was a
Yeah,
Quranist. I think it was a Quranist.
yeah, he was.
But I
Yeah.
wanted, I would love that you were
You
talk
see,
about
because
theology. Yeah.
you see, because the issue is that this is what I mean. That what I find from Brother MFG is that there is too much unresolved. Like there's too much unresolved emotions, like unresolved anger, and I'm not saying he's, a lot of wrong might be done onto him for him to be angry and to have these like negative emotions or this negative energy, but there's too much of it, and it does stop a fruitful dialogue. Because you see, every time we're talking, like if you're going to come from this place of you're going to come from this thing that, oh, this is a debate, or I know your game strategy, I know what you're trying to trip me up, I know you're trying to do this. Well, I mean, then there, we can't really have. Whereas, like, let's say Edip, I didn't know who he was either. He got introduced to me. He said, "Look," I said, "Would you like to have a mind trap?" He said, "Yes." I invited him on. He did get a bit heated as well, but for the most part, we just spoke, and he just spoke, and I just spoke, and like to me, at the end of the day, like if you're going to say, "Look, this is how I believe," and fine. But if you jettison and let go of the kind of hate, your message, even if people don't accept it, but it will become much more, I don't want to just say tolerated, but it will be much more harmonized. Like, so for example, his message does still have, like, I haven't heard any of his Friday sermons, but his message has a lot of this like hate. You guys are mushrikeen, you guys are all mushriks, you guys all follow idolatry, you guys, like mocking like the tradition, in the sense that you scholars, you think your scholars
I
are
do
God.
understand. It is maybe just 1% of all of this message. Come like I will maybe like I think tomorrow he will, I don't know, today
But
today is Friday.
but you see, but that's my point, because it might be, because this thing is bottled within. Now, when he's talking to somebody who's not of his persuasion, it comes out, and it's a very, it's like, this was my point, that look, even if you disagree, like somebody said today, like brother came on Husayn, he said, look, in the Shafi'i fiqh, if you scratch your head 3 times, you've broken your salah, and I just kind of laughed at it and said, look, well, that's absurd.
Now, I think we all laughed at
we all laugh at that and just find it absurd. Now we can, like that, we can do that. That's what I mean. We can be amused at certain things and dismiss them. We don't need to get angry at them and be hateful towards the guy that said it, as, oh my God, the scholar who said that thinks he's God. No, we don't need to do this. Like, that's coming from a place of rage. So that was my point, that you see, there is too much of this, like this kind of rhetoric of I'm like, we're on the saved sect, firqatun najiyah, we are the saved sect, everybody else is dalun mudil, and they've lost the Quran, we've somehow got it. And like, you see, that's just creating a cult. That's the problem. It's not creating a group, it's creating a cult. And once a person matures to losing that, inshallah, the rest of the things will come easier. And it's like I said with the tradition, look, how is it that in life you are prepared to accept in every other influence from every other walk of life? You're prepared to accept influence in fashion, in diet, in psychology, in health, in philosophy, in wisdom, in technology, in science, but the only place you're can't accept influence is from the Prophet, or you can't accept them from the ulama of Islam. Like, that's such a, like, that's sad.
We are all influenced, whether we like it or not. But the thing is, like, Islam, it is 140 over 100 and 1400 years of tradition. It shows that we will be all influenced by the teaching of all of that. But But
What
Quran,
we should be what? Sorry.
but-
What do you say we should be?
No, I say, of course, we will be influenced in our decision. Of course,
should
we
be what?
will be. We will be influenced because it is.
Influenced.
Well,
Yeah,
of
of course.
course, we will be influenced by like everything that's.
No. I don't mean would we? No, I don't mean would we be, because of course we would be influenced,
Mhm.
but would we accept like welcome influence? So obviously we are influenced by the Islamic tradition, just as he, for example, chooses Fatiha to pray in Salah. The only reason he chooses Fatiha is because the fiqh teaches you to pray with Fatiha and the hadith teaches you. There's no other reason. It's because the tradition teaches you that. But
No,
my point
maybe
is,
because he likes it.
sure, but he likes it. Why? Because
Yeah.
he's been shown that this is what people do. But what my point is that, do we welcome influence though? Welcome it. And it doesn't mean you have to wholeheartedly. And so to say, like, to me, that the logic that, look, you in life, we welcome influence from every area of the world. The only area we don't welcome any influence is from the Islamic tradition and from the Prophet. That to me is like the moments, that argument is where everything, the whole persuasion just falls and collapses, because that would be so, like, just look at that argument. That crushes the whole Quranist argument. Like, those that are Quranist by principle, not those that are epistemologically Quranist, because there's different schools I know of Quranists. There's some who don't reject Sunnah in that sense. They just see as like supplementary guidance, but not necessary to follow.
You will be surprised. I would have loved that you have. Yeah, we want to talk about different theology in Quranism, different fiqh, different discussion, different strand in Quranism, because Quranism is like it is a spectrum. Like, I know that and I do know that people don't like to, like, we don't even like to be called Quranists. Like because we prefer being called Quran alone Muslim, for first of all. So, like, but I do understand when somebody comes to me and say to me that you are a Quranist, like, it do not means harms in the first tense. What I'm saying that we Quran alone Muslim, we have different ways, different nuances.
No, of course,
different
there's
ways
many
of
different
engaging.
many different schools within
many different schools of ways of engaging. I'm not gonna say that only the way of MFG, or the way of Baba Shuaib, of the way of I don't know, Solo Qurana, say of
sure. But do you see this argument? But do you see this argument that, look, how can a people like value something deeply and dearly, which is Islam, and welcome influence in all areas of life, and the only area that is unwelcome to them, not welcomed, is the tradition of Islam? Like, that to me is such an argument that like this, I think, like that trumps the entire you see, because it doesn't make, like, because surely you're going to accept influence from poets, you're going to accept influence from artists, you're going to accept influence from actors, you're going to accept influence from, maybe you've read something that's been some quote by I don't know, like, maybe you've got different different people you like reading, Oscar Wilde, or this person, or Nietzsche, or Plato, or Aristotle, or you've got Francis Bacon. Anybody, you might read some people and think, I like that, I'm going to take this. You can't prove with that same veracity that these people articulated it 100% as it's written in that text 500 years ago. Sure, like, people have got text, but they could have been some things were miswritten, misread, some copies were altered. There's always that possibility. In many of these things you can't even trace it back, right? So if we can accept everybody, we can accept everybody as a source of influence, and the only person we don't accept is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as Muslims. That's like a very sad
Like-
state of affairs. And then
No,
the only person we don't accept is the Prophet and his disciples, his companions,
No,
and we don't teach.
I don't
we
think.
don't accept their companions.
Yeah, I don't. Okay, I don't think you like you can like maybe you don't understand what is at what we call as Quran Muslim say. Why when we say Quran alone, when we say Quran alone,
Yeah.
we know
You
that
see-
truth is everywhere. But when we say Quran alone, it is like we follow the Quran for
No,
guidance.
because look, no, because
do you-
they're
do you-
not.
do you-
Because,
do-
no,
do-
because
do-
look, the reason
do you
I'm going to
understand this,
stop that, interrupt that there is because I made that very clear in the beginning of the dialogue
Mhm.
with MFG. I asked him that do you, and I gave, and last week as well, I used the analogy, I mean, the week before, the analogy of the sun being the center, and then you have planets, and you have planets of moons. And or do you accept, or do you say there is no solar system, there is just a sun? And I said to him at the beginning of the conversation, is the Quran argument that you're presenting, is it born by epistemology or is it by principle? And I explained what that meant, and I told him, given him a week to think over it, because I introduced it to him the week before when he came. I said, are you saying that we don't have a problem with Sunnah of the Prophet? It's just sometimes we're not sure if this was an actual teaching or maybe somebody misunderstood it. So that is an issue of epistemology. So you don't have an issue, a problem. You welcome the Sunnah of the Prophet. You're just not sure if it was transmitted accurately. Or is it by principle that their Sunnah has no guidance? He says very clearly in the dialogue that there is no other guidance to come, that there are no truths out there. It is only the Quran. He said that the Prophet has nothing special about him. And he said that, and he was actually, I had to stop him because he was almost about to become disrespectful to the Prophet. And I said that, look, he doesn't accept anybody. And he said that, forget the scholars, Imam Malik and these people, he says the Prophet was nothing special about the Prophet. He says Allah just chose him, so that's why he is a placeholder. The place was special, it just happened to be the Prophet Muhammad. It could have been a different person. This person, this ideology has no sacredness about the tradition of Islam. It does not value the sacredness that is in this faith. It accepts the sacredness of the Quran, but it rejects the tradition wholeheartedly. Now, that is a disservice because any person who in their day-to-day life, you see, when they've removed their blinkers, welcomes influence from all areas of life that they can't prove epistemologically, yet they still welcome. They might have a quote on their wall that is written by, I don't know, by, they might say, oh, look, this quote was written by Mark Twain, but they can't prove it, let's say, or Shakespeare said that, but they can't prove it, or Ghalib said this line of poetry, I can't prove it 100%, Mir said this, and they welcome all of that, but the only thing they seem to reject so wholeheartedly is that when it comes to the way of our Prophet. So this, you can see why this person, this attitude is going to, unfortunately, it's going to not only rub people the wrong way, it's going to cause a very harsh reaction to him. Because you see, what you're doing is, and I understand his devotion, and I understand he might be coming from a place where he does love the deen, but the way he's putting it together, it's not just turbulent, it's very cancerous. You see, so cancer by its nature is going to cause a harmful reaction. So this was my point. And there's no room for misinterpretation. I gave him a whole week to think over the question, and then I asked him and explained it before asking him, whilst asking him, and he made himself very clear that we do not accept any guidance at all from anybody outside of the Quran, not even the Prophet, he said. And his words were that the Prophet was, like he was saying, there's nothing special about the Prophet except that Allah chose him. So you can see now why Muslims are getting offended. And so I understand how you're saying is very different. You see, now this was how I was thinking he was going to say. I was thinking he was going to say, I didn't think he was going to say principle. I thought he's going to say epistemology. I thought he's going to say, we don't have a problem with the teaching of the Prophet. We welcome it. The only issue we have is sometimes we doubt whether that was actually a saying of the Prophet or somebody misheard it. That's what I thought he was going to say. And we were going to have a lot of common grounds then. Because an argument from epistemology is still an argument from compassion, because they are, they're honoring the Prophet that much that they don't want to attribute something that they think might be a lie to him. So that is still coming from a place of love towards the Prophet. Hey, let's the passion takes over, and
I was saying, what is all this passion coming to me?
This is, you see now that you've got the passion flowing, I've got to go to sleep. Oh yes, salam. I'm supposed to have an early start. This is what ADHD does. This is the problem with living with ADHD, honestly. Once you get onto something, it's like time goes like this, and you have no, you have no perception of time how other people have it. I envy people how they view the world sometimes. I think, wow, like these people.
But what one thing is saying, I think like you here, you and and you have to understand that for any people, I don't know, I see from Shia people, from Sunni people, from Quran alone people, for any people, like we love you, Mufti. We love everything that you are doing. And
Allah bless you.
And
seriously,
and I know that maybe you and MFG, like the discussion was very fairy, but I think that maybe destiny, or maybe God will reunite you someday, and you will discuss. I will say that, and I will say something to people like watching. I know that there are many presuppositions about the Quran alone community, like many people flowing, like something like that. But like it is a community, and it is very welcome. And if you are very curious, if you got your time, a little time tomorrow, I think maybe in maybe 7 p.m. GMT. I think maybe GMT. I know exactly Greenwich Meridian time. I know exactly how to say it in English. Yeah. But in 7 p.m. like we will I think Brother Muhammad will go do a live stream. Go and
shukran.
And listen to him, and listen to what we are saying. And
and shukran, I want to say Thierno, shukran, Allah bless you, and keep you always smiling. I mean,
shukran to you,
so
man.
honestly, and likewise, look, the love is there. I say to anyone, even here, like I say in person as well, that people of different persuasions or whatever they are, I always welcome them, not only online. If people sometimes reach out, they come to meet me, I'm happy to have them hosted. I will welcome them and show that love, and honestly, and I do, and regardless, and I mean that, it doesn't matter what persuasion, what sectarianism, what kind of denomination people follow, even if they think very horribly of me, as long as they're not rude to me in person, then I will honor them, I will host them, I will treat them to we also, they're all very welcome, and I think that is the message of this faith. If anything, that's something that we are taught by the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and in the teachings of the Quran. So shukran Thierno for having this conversation with us. Take very good care of yourself, and speak soon. People, that was our beloved Thierno, who's come on a few times, and really this live stream has gone on way too long. I've shot myself in the foot, haven't I? What was that poem? I would often have that Soda Khuda ke vaste kar kissa mukhtasar. अपनी तो नींद उड़ गई तेरे फसाने में. Haye, haye, haye. You know, that's what's happened. I've shot myself. This is now going on for so long. Khair, I hope it's been of some benefit. Take very good care of yourselves. Those who see, somebody said, see, Sheikh even changed his clothes 3 times. Yeah. You nutty. You seem to be watching closely. Right. So, yep, those of you who want to reach out, Instagram is the way. Do subscribe to the YouTube. Those of you that want the one-to-one consultations, you're more than welcome. You should see on the ticker underneath. There it is for one-to-one consultations. Visit patreon.com/Malm. And it's tier 2. You can book yourself right in. Right. Other than that, have a very good evening. Right, somebody, Kashif, have you read my book on? I haven't actually. So, but Khair, maybe we could get a MindTrap on it. I believe it's the book on Cyrus. All right, and Dhul Qarnayn. Maybe we could get a MindTrap in the future. Let me know. Take very good care of yourselves, people. Salaam alaikum wa khuda hafiz.